So I'm starting again. Hey, Antares. I'm Battlefield Philosophy, or you can call me BP.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, BP.
Yeah, so
It's
what's
cool to
on your
be on a
mind?
show. Well, the big things that I think we wanted to cover today are relationships and the Blackpill philosophy and how those two kind of intermingle and play against each other.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest black pill ideas is the what's the point idea, where they think, well, what's the point anyway? Where they're like, the Andromeda galaxy is going to slam into the Milky Way galaxy, so we're all going to be dead anyway in 4 billion whatever years. Or they think, oh, well, this country is going to completely get destroyed, so might as well just goon all day, watch porn, play OnlyFans, play video games all day. And
So
yeah.
it's kind of the archetypal Wojak, isn't it? Like the doomer or whatever that you see on a lot of these memes out there. Um, I think there is a component of that, but you touched on something in our own private discussions, which is that there are strains of black pill, there are strains of doomer out there, and unrooting where these different sources are and how people slip into them is sort of crucial to curing yourself from said black pill. It's about generating hope for yourself and actually creating your own meaning to live.
Right. That kind of comes from from Viktor Frankl's methodology, more of that existentialism, meaning finding. But so if I try to sort doomer mentalities into voluntary and involuntary, because there's some people that have more choice than others when it comes to them going down that. Like some of them will inadvertently be watching some sort of TikTok or YouTube shorts, and they'll just scroll, and then they'll start doom scrolling. Well,
Mhm.
they'll be listening to, oh, the end of the world, or oh, this and that, it's so crazy, women are bad, men are bad. And so that kind of more goes towards the involuntary, where there's a supercomputer algorithm that's trying to figure out how to consume all of our attention span. And then the person that falls into that habit loop ends up wasting a large portion of their conscious time in the day. And then at the end of the day, they have low self esteem because they didn't accomplish anything. And that low self esteem then leads to a poor narrative about themselves where they can't get anything done in the day. So the next day comes around and they already have this bad belief about themselves that they're not going to really get anything done. And so then they don't commit to themselves because they believe that they don't have that within their reach.
I think that perfectly encapsulates the sort of general philosophy those people have. And it's a bitter pill I've swallowed myself. I was never fully black pill, but I dove into that philosophy because I had friends that fell to it. I had family that became doomers, so to speak. It's a surprisingly common attitude when, like you said, we have content that's built around engagement. And so it feeds us all these negative things because the brain is just psychologically hardwired to go for the bad shit first.
Yeah, and the other dynamic is the conflict avoidance, where people start to almost get addicted to avoiding their problems. And so they learn different, like their brain unconsciously starts to go towards the habits that help distract them, right? There's the chicken and the egg idea where what comes first, the distraction or the desire for the distraction?
Oh, that's tough to say. I wouldn't know where to unpack it. And I'd say probably elements of both are at play at any given point.
Right, where they might come in one part of the loop where they their dog died or a family member died, and now they're trying to find something to distract themselves from processing that because it's just so heavy. And then they'll start playing video games or start watching porn or something, and then that starts the loop of not getting anything done in the day. And then now they're in that mental hole that it's called a mental virus, where it starts grabbing more things that start supporting more distractions and more avoidance. And a lot of people, that when they don't form any core memories of winning arguments or winning conflicts, their brain then starts believing that they can't win arguments or they can't win confrontations. And so then whenever they get confronted with something, they panic, and then that panic leads to even a decreased chance of success, because that panic, usually when someone panics, they might start holding their breath, and then that might make them sick because they're not getting enough oxygen to their organs, or they're not getting enough oxygen to their brain, so they can't think as clearly. And then that leads them to perform a lot lower in their interpersonal communication, because without oxygen in the brain, the neural pathways can't think as far. And so when people can't think as far in their head, they can't do as much forethought. Their attention span starts getting decreased because they're panicking and the oxygen is getting decreased. Not only that, but when the brain starts to overheat, a lot of people are not drinking enough water. So there's a physiological component within this in our biology that's at play, where some people think it's just all in their mind, but they also don't realize that they're not giving themselves the ammunition to even confront their own biology, where they're not giving themselves enough rest, they're not giving themselves enough water, they're not focusing on how they're breathing. So how I consider is sometimes they will drown themselves in their thoughts, where they'll be thinking so much that they stop breathing as much. Or sometimes someone will be talking and they won't be pausing in between the different sentences they have. And so I call that drowning in one's words. Well, people will be talking, and then they'll have no pauses, or during their pauses, they replace the pause with an when that pause is supposed to have a breathing sequence. But a lot of people will skip that breathing sequence, and then they'll have less oxygen. And then that less oxygen will also make them not be able to think as well and not speak as well, and then they'll perform less, and it goes back into that cycle of lack of
voice and
performance.
speech, to interject real quick, because you touch on a great point I don't want to lose.
Yeah.
That voice and speech cadence, that rush sort of cadence of just immediately zipping through where we used to naturally take a breath in our speech, that is pure internet infecting the way we are meant to think. If you watch these YouTube shorts, if you look at these TikToks, what do? They're all super fast shortcuts that zip right back and forth with no break or pause. That organic breath that they would have in between those statements and cuts is ripped right out of it to fit it in that nice 6-second or so little chunk of dopamine that you get. But people are now spending so much time seeing that, focusing in that. People are what they eat. They're naturally starting to adopt cadences and language maladaptations that they're getting directly from the internet. And it's fascinating to see because it's happened within the last 15 years or so.
Well, I'm glad that you were talking more about this ammunition that people are getting or not getting. And so some people, they're paying less money for foods that are less healthy. So it's more of they're saving money by buying poison. And they're believing that it's not going to be that big of a deal, because the other black pill ideation is it's not that big of a deal ideation, because the one is what's the point, and the other is it's not that big of a deal. Like their bad behaviors are not that big of a deal is what
But those are contradictory thoughts. That's you can't hold both of those at the same given point.
Well, no. It's the what's the point of trying, and then they think, well, what's the they also think it's not that big of a deal if I just like eat McDonald's all day or just eat French fries and ice cream all day.
I would argue that that's the coping mechanism, but it's not actually the underlying thought. I think the underlying thought is still that nothing matters anymore. Therefore, they stop placing importance in things like good nutrition and good exercise, good sleep hygiene, good habits in general. It's a allowing of oneself to slough off into sloth, into laziness, into inaction rather than taking action. And that is sort of I think that's the biggest step that a black pillar has to overcome, is determining their impetus for taking action in their own lives, taking responsibility for their own circumstances.
Right, and so part of the cure is what's called narrative therapy. There's a book called Maps of Narrative Practice by Michael White, and he discusses how we become the story we tell ourselves. And so if people tell a story to themselves that they'll never be great, then they'll never be great. But if they tell themselves that they're going to try to copy great people, right? Like if I'm playing a video game, I'm going to be watching some of the professionals that play that video game to see the meta that they do. And that's one of the fastest ways to get to the top. And so, in the same way, a lot of people are not really copying the nutritional special people that are successful health wise. Did you listen to the latest panel that RFK had with Make America Healthy Again, where he was talking about seed oils being toxic?
Oh, I mean, he had some fascinating points to make about what we have allowed through our food administrations and vetting processes. Um, and it was honestly pretty eye-opening for me. I didn't see the full clips of it. I've seen some excerpts. But I agree with him entirely. America has, it's mostly honestly been since the whole World War II MRE sort of phenomenon happened, but we started creating, television meals, microwave meals, things like this. We just got very portable and perpetually survivable with our foods rather than actually making them nutritionally dense and healthy. Instead, they're very calorie dense and they'll keep you running for a long time and they'll last forever. But they're not necessarily good for you.
Right, and that's is why I get back to the two different ideas. So there's one idea which is what's the point anyway? Might as well goon.
Hmm.
And the other one is these bad habits are not even that big of a deal. So it seemed like at first you said they're kind of opposites, but
I see how they feed into each other now,
right,
though.
right, because it's the what's the point? And then like let's say their friend offers them some soda, which soda is basically just sugar water with other acidic qualities that tears up the gut lining. Uh, and so they'll just think it's not that big of a deal if I have a soda today. And then the next day comes around and they say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And that goes in the reverse, where not only is it doing the bad habits isn't that big of a deal, they also think avoiding the good habits isn't that big of a deal. Like, oh, I'm not going to walk today. I'll walk tomorrow. Like, I'll do it later as like a, it's not that big of a deal if I don't do it today. I'll do it tomorrow. That's
And then
another black
tomorrow never
pill.
comes.
Huh? Yeah.
And then tomorrow never comes for them.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's something that I always try and reemphasize with everyone that I try to help. I work a lot with these younger kids that are all fucking Zoomer Doomers that believe the world is ending and that they were fucked before they were ever born. And it's very hard to get them to take action on those things because a lot of their ingrained habits have been built in through a discipline of shit day by day. They've been having one soda a day instead of doing 20 push-ups a day. And you multiply that by 10 years, it can be a lot for people not only to acknowledge psychologically that they've been doing to themselves, and it's another thing entirely to strategize on ways to begin breaking those habits, to begin building better discipline.
I think another component is the toxic agreeableness, where a lot of people are going down the rabbit hole of virtue signaling, where they're having a care overload, where they're caring a whole lot about things that don't really affect them. And they're
Yes.
spending a lot of the intellectual energy going, oh, Israel, oh, Palestine, oh, Russia, or Ukraine, or some sort of issue out there. But then they don't realize, okay, hold on, are they actually like brushing their teeth, and are they going to sleep on time, are they drinking enough water in the day, are they trying to call a friend or call a potential uh, pay increase
Mhm.
avenue, where like are they trying to submit their resume and then call and follow up. Like when I was 20, I would be calling different places. The place that I got hired at, I would call them 3 times a day. They pretty much hired me because they wanted me to leave them alone.
So what's funny is that that still works for me to this day for getting interviews and networking and making connections and getting my foot in the door to make things happen for me, jobs and otherwise. You just keep knocking.
Yeah.
That's dismissed today. One of the big components that I always try to teach is that failure is the most intrinsic component of success. And these kids will look at me dumbfounded and mean, what do you mean? And I'll often break it down to them and say, like, do you know how many times I had to fail at something until I got good at it? Do you know how many times I have to knock and get a no before I get a yes? And most of these kids don't have a habit of being rejected in the first place. They never even try because a lot of the brain rot they've consumed has already convinced them there's no point to do it. So that when they actually go out and actually do it, they often surprise themselves they're often like, "Oh my god, that was way less stressful and way less intense and way less painful and awful as it was meant out to be." And that's how you break the black pill out of them. You actually have to make them go and get their hands dirty because all
There's
they're doing is sitting on their haunches consuming faulty knowledge.
right, they're sitting and they are consuming quick knowledge and not knowledge that is actually going to be a healthy impact for them. And I think
Anything that applies to them, really. All this Israel Palestine stuff, respectfully, who cares? They'll kill each other and figure it out. It doesn't impact you. It's not your job.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
respectfully, even if it was, you'd probably be fired pretty fucking quick because you're a useless basement dweller and you can't do shit.
So one thing I wanted to talk about was how there is a kind of an implied or unconscious belief that people might have where they believe that they need permission from others to overperform their past previous abilities. So a lot of times they're like waiting for someone to
God.
tell them that hey, like they can do more push-ups. Hey, they can like go to sleep on time. So they don't even try to overperform. Like what I do is I don't need permission from anybody else to overperform my own abilities. So other people seem to be waiting until some sort of father figure or some sort of role model instructs them like, "Hey, like write more stuff today about what you think," or "Hey, like actually write a plan. A plan is better than no plan." So a lot of times people default to having no plan because they never commit to developing even a small plan, even if the small plan is do a push-up every single day and then build upon that as people get stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. A hastily executed plan is always going to work more efficiently for you than a perfect plan that never makes it to materialization
There was a
every
old
single time.
lady that was, I believe, in her 90s, and she was doing this master class on writing, and she said the number one thing for writing is to write quickly before we forget or before we convince ourselves away from writing. And a lot of people, they don't really see the importance of writing. Writing is our non-biological legacy, and writing is also our memory insurance, where we are ensuring that the memory of who we are or what we thought or the intellectual features that we've achieved can be saved like an autosave, like a video game. So a lot of people don't see writing as a function that's gamified, where like if someone gets brain damage, how are they going to recover who they were, or how do they pick up the pieces after the fact? And a lot of people, they don't have any insurance for their memory. They're just winging it and not realizing that any given time they might get that damage, and they're not prepared.
Yeah, I've seen it firsthand. I've seen people lose months, years off their life because they took a knock to the head in the right spot just hard enough. Um, and it's a long way to recover, if ever. Um, Writing is our insurance, but to be honest with you, I'm not even concerned about writing yet because we haven't even gotten to the reading problem yet.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
have you heard this at all? Have you seen the abysmal reading scores the new generation is putting out these days?
No, but I can predict that it's comparable
We
to
have we have
cavemen.
freshmen we have freshmen in high school who can't read
Yeah.
because our system is simply push them through one teacher to the next, exacerbating the problem each time, and we can't fail them because the schools can't lose their money or
So
they'll fail even the
yeah, there's
kids that
a
are capable of being helped. There's a lot of perverse incentives in our system being set up. And there's also a tremendous lack of accountability in the system to make these kids do anything at all. So I've dealt with a few kids like this right now, troublemaking sorts that just knew they could sham their way through school and no one was going to do fucking anything because they knew they wouldn't do fucking anything. And they walked across the fucking graduation line the same as anybody else with smug little faces and happy little smiles and got their diploma and shook everybody's hand and went off to live their life. But the difference is, as soon as they're outside of the controlled environments they're forced to be in, they're going to fall flat on their face and fall hard.
yeah,
And it's a shame to see. But
right.
it really is a lack of parental accountability. Like we have a whole system right now in the West where two parents are required just to hopefully have some measure of meager existence in a lot of cases. That's not conducive to a child learning effectively at home.
Right, and so there's two different
The
well,
problem of the
there's many
black pill
different
begins at
factors.
home.
Yeah, there's so many different factors. So one factor is the AI factor, where a lot of kids are just pointing their phone, scanning it, and then the AI tells them the answer, so they don't have to have that intellectual struggle, and
Mm.
so they don't get that strength from the struggle. The other component is that the male mentor has been almost extinct. A lot of teachers are mainly women, and women are not very good at teaching men how to be men or teaching strength. A lot of women are really good at teaching agreeableness, and they're very good at avoiding conflict. And so then that's what leads to a lot of these simps that think that if they're very nice, if they look really good on paper, that girls will want to get with them. But we find
Well,
out later.
that's
Yeah.
but that's what they've been taught.
Yeah.
Why is that their fault? It's a failure of the institutions and the educational system at large to impose that upon these young boys, especially. I was someone who was nice and agreeable growing up because why wouldn't I want to be? I want to be kind and friendly and approachable and agreeable to people so that we can all get along and do well. The issue with that is that especially once puberty rolls around, you as a guy have different instincts that'll hit you like a bolt of lightning that you won't know how to do anything with those. You won't know how to process those. So you're going to form maladaptive behaviors. Or if you're still a nice guy, you're going to retreat from the world because you're like, oh my God, I have all these terrible things I want to do. I need to like hide from people and not expose myself.
Right,
Um,
and so there's a part of that where men are conquerors within their psyche, and a lot of that gets suppressed or gets coded into, oh, he just has ADHD. But it's like, no, a lot of men or a lot of young boys, they have these tendencies to conquer things and to achieve things, and they're kind of put into a box of doing a whole lot less than what their potential allows them to be. And so when they're in this box of doing a lot less than what their potential is, they have all this extra energy they don't know what to do with, and they start to when they get bored, they that boredom might lead them to self-sabotaging behaviors.
I completely agree. It's a quiet rebellion against the sheer misery and boredom of their existence.
Which
A
leads to
lot of
another
men are
component
bored
of
with no outlet.
another component is the satiated hunter, or where it's toxic contentedness, where a lot of
Mm.
guys, when they're still living underneath their parents, or while they are living in a very comfortable state of life, they don't spend time and energy pushing themselves to learn how to better conversate, how to have better interpersonal communication. They don't
So there is
consume
a
books on their
line
own
of
free time.
thinking within that. The military certainly upholds that sort of attitude, but I've seen it as a growing rhetoric that's being adopted within the manosphere, if you want to kind of envelope all of it into that. The male advice forums, red pills, incels, black pills, all these different conglomerates of male philosophy, I guess, that are trying to recapture a vision for men to pursue to get them out of this sort of collective apathy we find ourselves in. Um, for me, on my own part, at least anecdotally, I had to join the military to be able to find that level of stress and challenge, to actually meaningfully do it, to actually pass those sorts of instinctual coming of age rituals that we would have had if back in the day when someone said, "Ah, the sun, the tiger has been hunting and eating our cattle. We can't survive. Go out and kill it." And you and a couple of the boys get together to go out and fight it out. There is a lack of male rite of passage in all of our things because our institutions have been designed and shaped and catered for women.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing for women, because previously they weren't.
Well, it's
But
it's
the issue
indirectly
is
bad for them.
well, it's indirectly bad for them because the society around them will collapse when the men don't do shit, and because they still do all the jobs that absolutely fucking suck.
Right.
And there's a lot of them out there that are necessary to keeping all the fun shit going.
So I wanted to talk more about how this sense of not really caring that ends up becoming a person's hobby.
Yeah,
And then they
the
kind of fill that
self-reinforcing cycle.
what was that?
Yeah, it's a reinforcing cycle.
Right, so it's almost like so many people get asked what their hobby is, and their hobby might be watching movies, watching Netflix, watching TV shows, playing video games. Maybe they're walking around, maybe they're going to festivals, maybe they're going to music festivals. But overall, that's just not caring with extra steps because they're not actually doing things that self-improve. That
It's
they
hedonism fundamentally.
that
They're doing things that are enjoyable, but they're not contributing to a betterment, not of themselves, not of their community, not even like their close little pool of maybe friends.
and a lot
I
of this
mean,
has to deal with
we're dealing with
the
a population that doesn't even have friends. You have to
yeah,
realize these are people that truly have no social network.
and no negotiation
Know what to
skills.
do.
They don't learn how to be confronted or confront others. They don't understand when we disagree. Sometimes we can talk it out and find a common ground. But a lot of times when people disagree, they go, "Oh, disagree. Oh," and then
So the
it's over
yeah,
in their head.
the issue I find with it is that these are simply a population of people that have missed so many developmental milestones because they took alternate routes. They got all their answers and knowledge through AI, but they don't actually know anything or have the
Right.
wisdom to apply it. They got all their experiences from movies and television and YouTube, but they never actually went out and saw it themselves and realized, wait a minute, Saving Private Ryan was like this, but the actual army is a completely different experience, and people behave totally differently than they say they're supposed to behave in all this. You would never know any of those things if you don't actually go out and get your hands dirty and actually stick your
Yeah,
fucking
and my
fingers in it.
my rite of passage was working in prison. I worked in Supermax when I was in my 20s. So,
Oh yeah, so yeah, you've
and
seen
we
sort
had
of
a
the raw slice of life.
we had a common saying of sink or swim, so we would get new staff, and there's only a certain amount of times we could actually come through and help them and hold their hand until eventually you just had to say we have to let them fail because so much can be learned when we allow someone to fail, and a lot
So
of
here's
people
the
are not
dangerous
being
spot.
allowed to fail.
They're not being allowed to fail. There's not a lot of support for those that have, and there's also not a lot of support for those that have fallen too far behind. So this is a fun little segue in that sort of line of thinking, though. Are some of these people too far gone to save? Have these people missed so many developmental things that they should have learned, things that they should have picked up, things
And
that
when
their
we say
parents should
these
have taught them,
people,
things that education should have talked about, that they just flat out missed. And now they're coming out of the mist of self awareness at 18, 21 years old or whatever, and they've realized that they have spent their entire youth not knowing a goddamn thing.
so I think the
What's
answer is
going to happen to those?
primarily no, it's not too late. I mean, if I'm thinking about the people that are in prison, there's a lot of them that it is too late. I call it perdition when the person reaches the point where the path to do good and the path to perform well and provide a service for society, like when that path gets cut off, I feel like that's perdition, where the only path for them now is only to do evil because that's the only path that gives them results. But for the vast majority of people, if they actually apply themselves, they could get further in life. If they could do better today than they did yesterday if they actually do something about it. And
But perdition is a choice, fundamentally, though.
so
It is the culmination of choices. But
I
my
can
point
give
in that is
I can give a
all
story. So
these
like
like
when I worked in
yeah.
max security, when I worked in Supermax security prison, this is a place that's level 4, class B, where these are people that we have to put waist chains on, leg chains on, double cuffs. We have to strap them on a backboard and wrap them up in some more restraints and carry them. We don't even allow them to walk anymore because they're just that dangerous. And so in these type of places, I talked to one of the inmates there, and he says that no matter how many services, no matter how many pills, no matter how many therapy sessions we have with them, no matter what, all their friends, all their family, all their neighbors, all their girlfriends, all the places they make money from are all gang related. So a lot of people don't realize just how much gangs takes a factor within this whole entire thing. I hear so many people talk about the crime or the evil, but they miss the entire gang conversation that the vast majority, especially in the United States, the vast majority of crime is committed directly or indirectly from shot calling from gangs or cartels,
Hmm.
and it allows them to have a industry of crime where it's now a profession. That there are some people that would tell me that when they're about to go on parole, I would ask them what they would do when they go on parole, like what type of job would they would get. And the guy would tell me that his job was not having a job and to steal from fucks like you or me. And so it's like those are the type of people that people don't realize are out there. And so it's what happens when society is not disagreeable enough with the people that we do need to punish a lot harsher. Like, I'm more about killing the captains and lieutenants of the gangs that are shot calling, and one of the common responses to that is that, oh well, if we eliminate one of the gang captains or lieutenants, another one is just going to spring in his place. But the idea is that whenever we have put the shot callers of the gang into a box for a month, guess how long the crime stops for?
I'd imagine it keeps just on rolling.
No, no, no. It completely stops because a lot of the shot calling, a lot of the movements,
Really? Are they
yeah,
that integral?
yeah. It was completely telegraphed. Like we were studying this. We would put these captains that we knew were the leader. Like the thing is that when we this is a whole world. I'm pretty sure you don't know about, but like
Yeah, it's a parallel society.
yeah. So it's like we can easily detect who's the leader because we can tap phones. So we only have to tell them that we're tapping them after we finish. So 80% of drugs go into prison through visiting. And so when we see grandma giving drugs to a guy, we all know that grandma isn't the kingpin, right? So we tap her phone. We send people to follow her, to follow her car, follow where she goes. We tap the people that she talks to, and we eventually start creating a network until we figure out everybody that's involved in the entire communication. And this process might take 3 years in total to actually get a full network of everyone in part of that spider web. We don't go after anybody until we have the whole spider web in place. And then after we have the whole spider web in place, we now know who's at the top and who's at the bottom and who's where. And we lock up the captains and lieutenants. But the captains and lieutenants, they're extremely smart. And so the idea is that if we were to kill these captains and lieutenants, it's not like they're growing off of trees. A person who's extremely smart in the crime world is a lot less abundant than we might think. The vast majority of criminals are fucking retarded. Like, a vast majority of them are just chasing the dragon, trying to
Yeah.
get the next meth or heroin hit. They're not really that smart. But then working in Supermax, I've met some of these captains and lieutenants, and their whole entire cell is lined with books that they're allowed. And they'll be reading at least 5 books every single day because they're very fast at reading because that's all they do. So they'll be consuming at least 5 books a day. They'll be doing 500 push-ups a day. They're very, very high acuity. I don't know if you know what acuity means in this context. Um, so anyway,
Very
so
focused, disciplined.
so yeah,
What's
acuity is basically the number we would give to someone based on how much we have to be careful for how they know how to understand the system and get through the system and detect. So like a higher acuity number means the person can figure out loopholes very, very easily and very
like
fast.
I know acuity of vision is a very sharp sense of sight. Is it sort of
Yeah.
the same mentally? This is a guy who picks up something really fast.
Yeah, he knows how to cheat the system. Right. Like,
Okay.
he knows how to legally get away with shit, basically. So it's like we find those people, and those people are actually very rare. Like, it's in the same way where it's difficult to find people to study psychology at a very, very high level. There's only a dozen of people that are actually able to study cognitive dissonance at the highest level. But when it comes to leading a group of criminals, that takes a high class of Machiavellian understanding. And so us killing the people at the top does not mean that someone else can replace him in the same way. Generally, the reason why he's at the top is because he really is at the top. So whoever takes his place is not going to be at the top. He's going to be inferior to the previous person. And then we find that person and we take that guy out. And so it de-incentivizes. I mean, this is one reason why in China there's almost no drugs, because they kill all the drug dealers. I mean, there's a lot of other issues in China, but the one they do get right is completely destroying the gangs. I mean, the government's pretty much the gang, but but the idea is that for us to get rid of the high security threat groups, do you know what security threat groups is?
I mean, I would assume it's a cluster of extremely competent and dangerous individuals that you've
So,
identified.
so we've had to reclassify the word gang, and some people might think like that's stupid. Why would we try to like take away that word? Is that some liberal BS? It's like no. What we discovered is that there's different tiers to these security threat groups. For example, the Black Gorilla family, they instruct the Bloods and the Crips, and then they instruct the teenager type of gangs. So
So these are like your tier one operators of the gang world.
right. So like the higher the security threat group, they're the ones that are directing the lower tier ones what to do, because those are the ones that they actually come through with the AKs, and they're the ones that come through with the ski masks, and they don't ask questions. They just tell people what to do, and so like the BGFs will come through and tell the Bloods and the Crips what to do and how to operate. And because they're the enforcement arm, and then like a lot of the Bloods and the Crips, primarily like they have prostitution, and then like maybe they have like a lot of the music industry, but it's just racketeering. And so managing those racketeers, it does take an arm of force to protect against the other people, like the Aryans and the lowriders and all the other ones. I mean, in gangs, Asians aren't really a factor right now. It's primarily Hispanics. Hispanics are so heavy right now that they've fractured their own identity, where between the Sorteños and Norteños, where there's the Southerners and the Northerners, where they don't get along with each other.
Hmm.
And so this is kind of like going way into the weeds, but the whole idea is that this is a whole world out there where a lot of crime isn't just crackhead Joe on the street. It has to deal with crime.
Organized parallel societies of very
Right,
competent
yeah.
and capable people who are perfectly happy to direct all of that despair and malignant
Right, and so what has happened was the
against
people
the world.
that in the past we would just string them up, or we would just give them what we call the metal pill. We like just shoot them on the
Yeah,
spot when we find out that this person's
a lead suppository.
yeah, exactly. And so nowadays, the prison industry and the pharmaceutical industry and the inmates are all finding ways to find handshakes with each other. Right? So the pharma industry, they're trying to find people to test their new medicines, because they're always trying to test the new medicines on humans. And the number one human class that's willing to take new shit are inmates, because a lot of them I would give medications to, and they would take it first and then ask me what it is after they took it.
That's
because
fascinating. Just because of their just high
so
aggression, low
so
impulse control sort of
so a lot of people
personality template, or
a
what is
lot of
it?
a lot of people think that anger is like one of the strongest emotion movers. Like it moves people the most. But really, the strongest mover is the lack of interest. The strongest mover is boredom. Like people will change their whole entire sexuality when they're bored. People will change the whole entire life mission if they're bored with their current life mission. And so
Yeah,
people don't
but
realize that like when people are in a box, they'll do anything. They'll want to take heroin. They'll want to take, oh, what's this blue pill? This there's
the
that
pursuit of
one
escapism just becomes all consuming at
there's
that
that
point.
one Reno 911 joke where the lady is like, I take the blue pill to keep the voices away. I take the red pill to make me go up. I take the yellow pill to make me go down. I take the orange pill to make the Beelzebub demon stop talking to me.
Yeah.
And so it's Like we have all these new pills. We're only like we're barely third generation of antipsychotics. I don't know if you know that or not. And so we're barely third generation, and so a lot of the medication we're giving people to chemically restrain people, we're very at the very cutting edge. We're very pioneering. I mean, in the engineering field, how many generations is in the engineering field? Many, many, many hundreds of years. I mean, calculus goes way back to like Pythagoras and all these different types of ancient philosophers, right? But when it comes to psychology, yes, there's some philosophy that does lead of some of the ideas, but most of the psychology underpinnings came from Freud in the 1900s. Barely the end of 1800s when we actually started getting serious about it, when we started to have to convince the Puritans that psychology isn't gay.
Right. Sometimes the cigar is just a cigar.
As Freud would say it, right. So getting back to this is that Blackpill has to deal with, like what we said, where some people are voluntarily choosing Blackpill because they feel like they feel like that's the best choice for them. Other people are doing it because they don't know better. And then there's some
I think
people,
a lot of people are doing
and
it
then there's
because
a lot
they
of
don't know
people
better.
that what I call them sewer kings. Sewer kings are people that they thrive at the bottom because they're free at the bottom, right? The type of
Yeah,
people
no
that
expectations. They're functionally invisible. Yeah.
we can't do it. Like they love going to prison. That's where all their homies are at. And so as soon as that they're at if they don't have anything, it's almost like before I can punish something, before I can punish someone, I have to give them something. It's like the classic SpongeBob case of Mr. Krabs gets mad at Patrick and tries to fire Patrick, and Patrick says, "Well, I'm not even your employee." To Mr. Krabs, and Mr. Krabs says, "Okay, you're hired." So Patrick is like, "Great, I'm now an employee," and Mr. Patrick says, "Okay, now you're fired." So that just illustrates that, like, for a lot of these people, we can't take away anything from them because there's nothing to take away.
There's an underlying pathology at the root of that, though, that I think inhibits their recovery. It's again, it's a reinforcing sort of philosophy that digs you deeper into it the longer you're in it. But people that go to have those initial successes, they get that little job at McDonald's that gets them out of the basement. They clean the room, they do all these things. They are constantly fighting against an underlying urge to sabotage themselves and return to the sewer king because, like you said, now they have something to be accountable to. Now they have responsibilities. Now they have duties. Now they are no longer an invisible factor in the world. They exist to someone or to something and have obligations. And to someone who is completely unused to even a single one, that is probably the most terrifying thing they can possibly imagine.
So I did want to bring up, because it seems really interesting that we're bringing up a little bit of this prison stuff, because when I was going through bachelor school to learn applied psychology, they kind of beat into our heads about the psychology behind prison, because a lot of people are living in a prison of their mind and they're not in prison. Like there's some people in prison that are more free than people outside of prison.
Yeah.
And so
Home is what you make of it, I guess.
there's a book called Virus of the Mind, and it talks about different levels of conscious slavery, where there's 3 different levels. The first level is the foreclosed identity foreclosure, where a person's doing something because someone else told them to do it. Like, let's say their mom told them to do it, their dad told them to do it, the government told them to do that, the employer is telling them to do it, and so they're kind of forced to do it. So that's level 1. Someone's doing action because someone else told them to. So the chains are externally enforced. So level 2 is when chains are internally forced, where no one is enforcing them to stay in the gang anymore at a certain point. Like as soon as they exit a certain point, now they're on their own. Maybe they get that McDonald's job. Maybe they get that job and they have getting some money. But then when they get off of their work, they then go to the club. They go to those places where there's trouble. They go and hang out with the homies that are definitely no good for them. So that's them Like their chains, when the level 1 chains are not there, the level 2 chains are forcing them to go back to the level 1 chains, where the level 2 chains is such that they are, when they do have free time, to think and to develop themselves, they instead choose to sabotage themselves, and maybe they waste their time on Netflix. Maybe they just eat the bad food. Like, no one is telling them to eat soda or to drink soda, but on their own chains, they're stuck to that poison. And then level 3 is now is the final stage, is where they're doing the healthy steps, they're doing the healthy actions, they are being paid based on their own ideas and their own actions, almost like a person who loves to do art. Level 3 would be to be paid to do their art, so they don't even really have to do work anymore. Like, that's level 3. Like, for me, level 3 for me is to be paid to do podcasting, to be paid to counsel people and to help improve them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that every person needs to have an understanding of what level 3 would look like according to their own worldview.
What do you do with people like Blackpillers, though, that have never even
They haven't even constructed level
conceptualized
3.
the spot? They don't even have an inner space in their own minds. They're prisoners in their own bodies. So where
Yeah.
do we start? Where do we give these people
So there's
constructs to work with?
Yeah, so there's a dichotomy of how to provide therapy to other people, and as we've discussed before, is that we're not a therapist or a provider or a patient to each other in any way. But there's two different types and styles of talking to a person to try to help change them. One way is directiveness, and the other way is non-directiveness. Or one way is trying to massage them and try to like encourage them and not really telling them what to do and not really confronting them. It's more of massaging their personality. And then the other way is directiveness, which is where we try to direct them, we confront them, we go, why are they drinking soda? What time are they going to sleep on at night? Wait, they're going to sleep at 2 a.m. in the morning and they're waking up at noon? What's that about, right? So the idea is like, which one should we do? One way is Rogerian style, which is the non-directiveness. And then the Gestalt therapy is where we try to confront them about their mannerisms and try to hold them accountable and ask them what they're doing and try to figure out how the person is phony. So the idea is that when someone is distracting themselves, when someone is going off a bad path, there's a level of phoniness to them that they're lying to themselves. There are so many people that they cannot be even honest to their imaginary friend. Like, I'd tell this to inmates that, like, I'd tell them, like...
that just sounds like a fate worse than death. Go on.
Yeah. So, like, I'll be talking to inmates, and, like, there'd be a lot of inmates... They like talking to me more than their counselors, because a lot of counselors were very, very cookie cutter, very, very basic. And for me,
most psychologists absolutely fucking suck.
Especially those that work in prison. Especially those that work in prison, because most of them that are working in prison are just trying to get their time in, and then they go work at more prestigious areas. Because a lot of prestigious areas don't want to employ someone who's a baby psychiatrist. They want to employ someone who has 3 years of working in prison because they've actually worked with the gutter, like people that are shooting up and lying and stabbing each other.
When you've worked with the gutter, it's far easier to work with the functional.
Right. So a lot of psychotherapists and a lot of people that have all these degrees that work in prison, they're very, very not proficient. And so that would mean I would get even more proficiency, because even the psychiatrists would call me up and ask me what they're supposed to be doing. So I would be educating psychiatrists on what they're supposed to be doing. And so anyway, what I'm getting to is that I lost my train of thought here. Yes, the imaginary friend thing. So the imaginary friend thing. So I would tell them, because they're asking me, like, how are they supposed to improve themselves? And I said, they might not believe in God, but even if they do or if they don't, the reason why God serves a function is that that's someone that they can try to communicate with every night or every morning or whenever they have a chance in their own quiet of their own mind. That maybe they're imagining God, or maybe God is real, or maybe God isn't real. But I told them to act as though he's real, but to never lie to him. And so, like, make an imaginary friend that they know is imaginary. So if they ever get voices, know that that's not God talking to them. That's the heroin talking to them, or that's the meth talking to them. So I was telling them, like, if they can't even tell the truth to themselves, to their imaginary friend, then what hope do they have? And so I'd tell them, like, are they on good terms with their imaginary friend? Meaning, if they tell themselves, if they give their word to themselves that they're going to do 10 push ups that day, and they don't, that means they just lied to themselves. And how someone acts when they've lied to themselves shows how much respect they hold to themselves. So, a large portion of this is for me to try to help them hold themselves accountable. And I can't really be there, and they can always lie to me. So, I try to have them uh, develop a construct of someone that they can talk to that really can't manipulate them. Because if they're in their mind telling themselves what they're going to do that day, then they're not really. It's not really like another person who's going to use that to manipulate them. And so there's so many people that maybe they don't have any friends, and maybe they do have an imaginary friend, but they lie to that person too, or they lie to themselves, where they tell themselves, "Oh, I'm going to get better. This year is going to be different." There's the classic cliche of the every single year people have their resolutions, right? And then how long does that last for most people? February, right? At most, for most people. Uh,
Hmm.
so the whole idea is like trying to figure out how to have people gain accountability, because that's what the male force is supposed to be. The male force is supposed to be a father figure, punishing people when they don't do what they're supposed to be doing. Right? There's a reason to be punished for when someone doesn't do anything that they're supposed to be doing. But that's not there anymore. Now people get participation trophies. Another times people don't get punished when they're losers. Like a lot of times people play games, and in those games they never have a cue for when they lose. And there's a habit for that where that occurs, like watching a movie. How can someone figure out if they lost watching a movie?
Hmm. The fact that they didn't enjoy it at the end of it, right?
But then again, it's like, I mean, if they never really got any good takeaway, maybe they lost. They lost their time. But then again, that like in a video game, it's like if someone loses, it says defeat, and then their points go down. But then there's some people that play video games where there's absolutely no signal of them losing, which that's what's being lost in society. In society, there's a lot of people that avoid getting that feedback of losing. And I think that's what leads to the black pill cycle, is when people start to avoid that
Lost.
that conflict of the feedback that tells them that they lost. Like,
See, I love losing. Losing to me is the first part of success.
right.
And honestly, it's the more substantial part too. Success is what happens at the very end of trying everything you possibly can and failing a little bit less each time until finally you have something substantial.
Right, and the idea is
And
that trying means to accept the chance of failure.
you have to implicitly. You can minimize its risk all you want, but it's always going to be lurking there.
And the idea is
You just
that if we
embrace it.
can't lose, then does winning really even matter in that case?
Losing, winning could not exist without losing being a thing.
Right.
No more different than dark not being able to exist without
And,
light.
and the idea is that there needs to be measurements for our goals, because a lot of people have no measurement cues in their goals. For example, they don't have I have to call 5 people today. Maybe I'll call potential employers. Maybe I have to call my mom or my dad. Maybe call my friends. Just somebody to be socially engaging.
Yeah,
And
you describe almost my social discipline and planning my itineraries for the day on like who am I meant to reach out to, who am I trying to get a hold of, things like that. I do plan for myself, but I've never attached a failure condition to it because it's simply never been something that I was concerned about failing. To me, it's not energy intensive to do those things and make
Hmm.
those things. The issue I find with a lot of black pillars is that things like that do take them a tremendous amount of exertion and energy. It's building up their endurance and capacity for it too. Where you have to realize like you're digging through so many underlying pathologies and fear responses. It takes a long time to make progress for them, and you have to start them out small to build the strategy.
And so, I want to springboard to what you're saying, and I think getting back to the black pill is that there are a lot of people that do not believe in themselves, which is I think the big crux of it, where people they're
Or they
as
don't believe in anything.
yeah, yeah,
They're
yeah.
they're they've slipped into the Nietzsche nihilism
Well,
phase
and
and
that's the thing
never
is
got
that
back out.
when they think of what they've accomplished in life, they get sad because they think back and they think maybe a passing high school, maybe. But other than that, it's like they have very very few memories of winning. They also have very few memories of losing. But the thing is that if 80% of the time, if not more, we lose, if they practice something 5 times and all 5 are losses, their narrative of themselves is that they've are a primarily a loser, and so they don't realize that to believe in themselves they have to believe in their right to try, that they should have an inherent right to try to change themselves. And that what I think of this is that there's a fear of failure and there's also the fear of FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. So what I tell younger men is that their fear of missing out has to overcome and be primary over their fear of failure, where they have to fear missing out in life over their fear of failing in life. Because if I miss out in life, that's going to feel a lot worse than if I don't do anything and they end up not winning anything and I just get a lot worse. Because to get better in life, to perform better, we have to practice a whole lot. Like it takes 1,000 losses, 1,000 failures to actually start getting these skills.
I'm just marinating on what you've said. Making a little note over here as well. 1 second.
Okay.
So if there was a one thing that that you would think would be like a good starting point. You have a black pillar. He's lived in his basement for 22 years. Like you said, his biggest success is high school, which he's very quickly already written out of his head as fucking worthless in the first place. So it wasn't even a victory at all. So he takes no like confidence boost or anything in it whatsoever. He's just dug himself into this pit. What is that first great step?
The first
It's
great step
it's
is
creating the
to
need to change.
the
They
mer-
have to
the
need
first
to
step
change.
is to create any plan, any plan. Get a piece of paper and a pen and write down what they wish they had in life.
Ooh, that's a good one. Do you think that might
There's a book
push them
about this.
further
It's
into it
called
though if they
it's
make
yeah,
what if they make their experiences? I find a lot of black pillars have unrealistic expectations of themselves. I'll sit and mentor people within like the levels space, for example, that want to make $100,000
uh-huh.
and they haven't even graduated high school.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
So I
like I said, it's to
there has
have
to be a
that is to
realistic
have
goal.
that goal and then to break it down to smaller parts.
I think it has to come from the foundation up. The goal has to literally be I will brush my teeth every day. And then from there go into I will brush my teeth and clean my dishes every
Well, I
day.
was going to be getting into
And
the
I
in-
will
I was
brush
going
my
to get
teeth
into
and make my
the
bed.
I was going to get into the whoop modality. The whoop modality is wish, outcome, obstacle, plan.
The
So,
whoop modality. I'll look that up.
yeah, it comes from a book called Rethinking Positive Thinking by Gloria Otegan.
Hmm.
She studied attitudes about achievement and which attitudes was best in achieving in life. And so she would get a bunch of people that had shared goals, such as losing weight. Losing weight is a very, very common goal that many people share. Another goal that she would study is getting into a relationship that is healthy. That's another very common goal of many, many people who are single. Another common goal is maybe getting a good job. That's another really common goal. Maybe another one is building muscle, right? So she would have these different factors of what people wanted in their lives, in their future. And she would check up on them, and she would take measurements of their vital signs. She would take measurements of these different types of things. She would
So you have
ask them
an
questions about,
accountability factor.
huh?
So you have an accountability factor at play.
She also would ask them about their outlook about it, and then she would code it into what that would mean. So she would go, okay, this person's pessimistic, this person's optimistic, this person's realistic. And then some of them she would not provide any sort of education, and those would be her controls. And then there'd be people that she would provide different types of attitude prescriptions. And so one attitude prescription that was the most successful was the Whoop attitude of how to operate. And that way of operating would be to think of a wish, to write down the outcomes of that wish, of if I were to achieve that, what would I get? So the outcome step in the O is to try to visualize what would happen if I got it, to help the mind think about it more. Because a lot of people think about what they want, but not think about it more deeply after the fact and what it would take of getting there and the outcome of reaching it. The next step would be the other O, which would be obstacles. So the next step after visualizing what would happen after they achieve it, the next step is to think of all the obstacles that they can envision for what's in their way, and then to write that stuff down. So they would write down, okay, for me to make $100,000, what's in my way? I have to like get a degree, or I have to get some sort of trade school certification, maybe become a journeyman in electrician or plumbing or something like that. Ask different people about how to make more money, kind of a thing. So it's like the obstacle is trying to learn about what's in their way, and the plan is the P for creating a plan for what they can do that day to get closer to that wish. And then every time they recycle through the Whoop thing, they think of whether or not they want to stick to the same wish or if they want to go to a different wish. So a lot of people in the black pill space, they don't even spend any time to think about what they wish. They already discount their ability to even
They've
develop a
already
plan.
well, they've crushed their dreams into dirt already. That's what I think is so positively insidious about the philosophy. It's not just a general malaise. They're literally just attacking what they
Well,
love.
it's so the idea is what is the benefits, and the benefits of black pill is it makes them feel accomplished to do nothing. It makes them feel satisfied. It's almost like mental masturbation. It's throwing a pity party for themselves.
Yeah, I figured out the
It's
secret code that no one else has figured out, and I was smart enough to just bow out of that
Yeah,
because
it's
it's
the I figured it out that I'll just get high every day on porn and drugs or something, and I figured out the best way to compete is not to compete at all, and that's kind of like
so here's a
that's what
scary
I
point
call
though.
the enlightenment trap. The enlightenment trap is when someone thinks that they're above trying more.
What if it's not that they think that they're above trying for more? What it's if they've simply just animalistically understood that this can be perpetuated, so why would I try for anything more? I can just subsist and exist just like this for
Almost like
forever.
the Diogenes syndrome, where wanting
Yeah,
to
I'll
just
just get a barrel. I'll just get a barrel and go searching for honest men with a lantern. It'll be funny.
Yeah, well, one of the ideas I have to that comes from the Tao of Seneca, Volume 3, where it's the same things that that was discussed with Alexander the Great. And what was asked of Alexander the Great that really put a fire under his ass was, how are so many people okay with being a nobody? How can someone be okay with being a nobody? Some people are okay with being a nobody, but
hmm
I don't know how
I
people.
many are not. Most people want to be a somebody, even if it's not a prominent, world acclaimed, life changing someone that's
And this is
written
when
in the
we
front
run
pages
into
of history.
the this is when we run into the ego paradox. the ego
Mm.
paradox is something that I've suffered from, and I think you've suffered from before. Ego paradox is that one angle, we want to be a somebody, we want other people to know us, we like want to have made our mark in the world, have some sort of like butterfly effect on the world, throw our starfish into the sea, and like it really affect the ocean in a great grand way. But then the other side of our ego is like, oh no, people are like watching us, and like that paranoia level of ego of like being very careful to not become visible to others. And so there's two sides of that coin. One side of the coin is like really grandiose, manic. The other side is the depressive, panic, and the paranoid side. And so it's trying to figure out how to balance the person into more of a steady way of not, because sometimes they'll think, oh yeah, they're so great and grand, they're going to do a lot of stuff. They have all these idealistic aspirations, and then maybe a month of doing that, they realize they didn't get really anywhere. Because to do great things, it takes a whole lifetime of applying oneself. And so then they might go into the other mode, which is the depressive, panic, and paranoid version, where they think the FBI is watching them, or they think that, yeah, they think that like
Yeah. Oh, I've seen that.
someone's going to steal all of their ideas the second that they make a break in the market. And so,
I think there is a healthy middle ground, though, and I'll try to argue from that point because I agree with you. I think that is a dynamic and struggle for a lot of people, myself included. But
right.
it's not that I am paranoid about the trappings of all those things. It's that I realize there are very real trade-offs with going down that path.
Right, and that's what I
Fame, for
call it.
example.
But
Imagine,
this whole idea
yeah.
is I've labeled it the ego paradox, which
Oh
is
God. So they're using those same rationalizations to justify inaction rather than saying, well, I don't want to do that path. I don't want to be famous. I want to be able to
right.
walk into a bar and not be recognized and just buy a beer and sit in a corner.
Right. So what happens in the book Rethinking Positive Thinking? What happens is when someone thinks very manically, very positively, very grandiose about how much they can do. Maybe they've got an A on their test. There's something good that happened. Maybe a girl touched his wiener, and then now he's like feels on top of the world
Oh,
now.
oh my.
Yeah, and then what happens is now he's very on top of the world, but then again he starts getting paranoid now that he's at the top because a lot of people fear success because
He
success
now has
comes with a
something to
lot of
lose.
responsibility. Now they get all these people that are the crabs in the bucket trying to pull them back down. Now they get all these people
Sure.
that I mean,
Pretenders that are trying to like ride on your coattails. There's a whole slew of problems that are unique to success.
right. Yeah, it's an island at the top. Like the smarter I get, the less people I can talk to without getting disappointed with the other person I'm talking to. I mean, if I'm talking to a 30-year-old man and he can't even listen to 10 books, it's like, how does he have a day where he cannot spend 5 to 10 minutes per day to consume a book through audio format? And then they start giving me a slew of excuses. And the thing is that I have a very Archimedean level of understanding the world where there's only a certain amount of excuses. There's not a infinite diversity of excuses. Generally, they don't have enough money. Generally, they don't have the time. Generally, no one in their life is doing it, and so they don't know if they can trust me. So there's all, but generally the excuse diversity is maybe 10 at most. And a lot of these excuses get cycled as soon as one gets defeated. And because the real thing is that they don't want to spend energy there, they'd rather do their favorite thing, which is their dopamine addiction.
I feel like that would be a fun thing to catalog for you. I'd like to see that. The 10 excuses that people give.
Yeah, I've written about it. There's actually they talk about it in it's actually within Viktor Frankl's. Let me get into it here. Da-da-da. I believe it was it. No, it wasn't this one. They have the different types of excuses and distraction mechanisms. I have to go into chapter 5. I gotta find chapter 5. I have a big assortment of documents I've collected. All right, so chapter. All right, I'm almost there. Okay, I pulled it up. So yeah, so we can probably come up with several ways of avoiding taking responsibility to ourselves or others. Because sometimes we'll avoid responsibility to ourselves, and sometimes we'll avoid responsibility to others. One excuse is compulsivity. This is the quality of becoming so consumed with an activity that a person avoids examining their life. The activity overwhelms the person. These days, we see compulsive behaviors all around us, such as compulsive eating, sex addiction, working unreasonably long hours, like workaholics, where they spend all their time working and not time actually being themselves outside of work. Uh, the underlying question that therapists want to ask their clients and clients need to eventually ask themselves, which is, what is being avoided by these behaviors I'm performing, and what is this avoidance keeping me from in my freedom? The next one is called displacement. This is the process of placing one's problems or issues onto others so one does not have to take responsibility for examining them. Displacement happens in numerous ways, such as projecting one's issues onto others, having psychosomatic illness to avoid one's issues, blaming others for their problems. If only my therapist was better at this, I would get better. Or if only this pill was better, I'd get better. Or blaming the events on their own problems. So saying, well, if it wasn't for that job demotion, if it wasn't for that car accident, I could be happy, or I could actually start doing what I want in life. And so
So
they,
I'm hearing a trend as you list all these things off, and it's a constant pivot from basically just the locus of control is always external for these people. It's never internal work. It's never something that they have done that they must own, that they must take responsibility for. There is always an externality to blame for their circumstances.
right. And
Am I
when it
getting
comes
that
to
right?
displacement, it's also for, and when they see someone succeeding, get jealous and they internalize someone else's success and they try to tear that other person down so they feel less bad about themselves,
Crabs in a
right?
bucket. Yeah.
Right. The other one, there's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven in total. So the third one is playing the victim, which is, I did not make.
Oh God, that's a whole philosophy. It's taken over the fucking planet.
Yeah, like, oh, my boss is a racist, and that's why I can't get any sales with my clients, or my parents emotionally abused me, and therefore I'm 40 years old and I still can't get things back together again.
So what's funny is to hear the black pillars kind of work themselves into a tautology over that is further justification for why they can't change. They'll say, "Oh God, my life sucks because my life has always sucked."
Right, and so they say, so all these events might devastate that person because they now feel like they're owed something by the world. So now they try to go to the world and try to, like, score pity points and try to cash in all their pity points, which women can get away with that more often than guys because generally there's simps that once they hear a girl crying, he uses a canoe to canoe up her tears into her pussy. Uh, so they try to score all these pity points, and however, why is it that some people can move on from these events while others who are in the exact same situation, I mean, similar situations, I mean, nothing is really one for one, but some are extremely similar and some are even worse, right? I mean, someone's like, oh, my dog died, and another person's like, well, I had two dogs and both of them died, right?
Well, let's extrapolate to an extreme example. I myself and a buddy are in a firefight, and we both have to fucking fight and shot and get shot at and watch friends and enemies die. I go home and I'm perfectly fine. My buddy goes home and he blows his brains out. Why does that happen?
Yeah, there's a good question, and there's a couple of different answers I can
That
provide
didn't
for that.
actually happen. I'm just creating an extreme
Yeah,
example.
yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah. There's plenty of different things. So when it comes to SI, which is suicidal ideations, it comes to generally when people start resorting to force. It means that they feel like they lack choice. Every
Hmm.
time choice is stripped from a person, they start considering a way out of that box. And sometimes the way out of the that's why we're never that's why we're instructed to never back an inmate into a corner, because they'll find a way out of that corner that we don't like. And so in the same way, where if a person feels, this might not be real or not, but if they feel in their own perceptions that they do not have a choice in their life to feel how they want to feel in life, if they feel like they cannot be who they want to be, then that's when they start considering those options that are very dire and drastic and despair related.
Would you say that black pillism is a sort of form of weaponized suicidal ideation?
I
Is
think
it
that
passive suicidal ideation?
so. Maybe the question might be better asked is, are there some people out there, or are there algorithms out there that are kind of weaponizing it, where there are intentional black pills out there that is being kind of thrust onto people, maybe for money as a racket, or maybe a country is like, I want to defeat that country, so I'm going to give them an algorithm of the doomer algorithm where
I could suspect both of those that are play, considering how hard countries like China, for example, ban it on their own internal servers.
right. So hopefully I've answered that enough, because I don't want to linger on this too much. Uh,
Yeah, for
the,
sure.
the next one is, I think, what we just start talking about. The next one is called losing control. Ever know someone who just lost it for a while? Like they go into a rut, whether
Yeah, they finally hit a breaking point, whatever
they've
that was, and they
they've
simply collapse for however long.
whether they've quote unquote lost their minds, or they've went crazy for a while, become enraged, lost their temper, or lost their way in life. These are mechanisms some will use to avoid taking responsibility in the current situation. So in their mind, this is kind of like the black pill, where in their mind they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm just so depressed. I'm in a rut. I can't get out of bed. I'm just bed rotting. I'm just I have no motivation. Poor me, I have no motivation." So basically, what happens is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So after they tell themselves the narrative that they are a loser, that they've lost, and that that's what they identify with, they're no longer identify with the trier person or the experimenter person. Because for a lot of ways for people to do better in life, they have to start experimenting with change. Because the thing about staying the same is they stay the same. the the best client out there is the complete opposite of the worst client out there. And the worst client out there is a person who doesn't want to change, a person who's not willing to change. And so a lot of people, they might be telling us one story about how they're a loser, they got into a car accident, their dog died, blah, blah, blah. They have all these excuses and all these stories, but it might just be something else that's using that as a proxy, meaning
Hmm.
they just want to go to bed without any sort of plan. Just whenever they pass out, they want to jerk off to porn anytime they want to. They want to do their favorite thing and let no one get in their way. It's more of like their compulsions are the underneath problem, and they will blame themselves being a loser, and that will help them encourage themselves, and they will accept any identity that helps them with their gooning abilities, right? So it's like, if I'm a loser, then I feel better when I waste my time today.
Interesting. So now this is an anecdotal measurement that I've seen on some recent surveys that measure things like general population happiness, contentment in the population. Are you generally a happy person with your life? And a lot of these studies as of late have revealed that conservative minded people and traditional, I guess you could say traditional minded people, are scoring higher than leftists and progressive minded people, and I don't think that's a coincidence. More people I know that align with sort of leftist style ideals and that sort of avant-garde, postmodern, nothing matters, so we can do whatever we want sort of philosophies tend to fall into the black pill traps more so than the black pillars I know on the right side of it, who typically get it in through like They're typically there as a
So
transitory period.
I did want
They
to touch
experience a
on
hardship or something like that.
this is a good kind of uh, change or direction to go more towards purpose. Because a
Yes.
lot of the black pillars are like, what's the purpose? And as you're saying, like Christianity might have
It is
that
a
purpose,
purpose.
right?
It may not be the right purpose
Right,
for
right,
those
right.
people,
So
but people with a purpose are
right.
more resilient to black pill.
So in response to those black pillars who say like, what is the purpose? Like, what is the duty? Like, there's no such thing as like the duty or whatever. But a lot of those people haven't really explored the different types of philosophical duties out there. Like Immanuel Kant's philosophical duty of of the intellectual imperative to improve ourselves to become intellectually superior to our ancestors and to guarantee that our descendants become superior to us. That's a duty that a lot of people struggle to get to and to fully accept, a lot of times
But
because it
they
isn't
don't see a
fully
vision to
articulated.
meaningfully reach it.
Well, a lot of times
Right, right
they're
now
not
they
they're
do.
not articulated it in a straightforward way. Like, hey, we have to become better than our parents and have to guarantee that our descendants become better than us. And why? Is because we are benefiting from a lot of things based on people following that duty. If we follow that duty, then
Those things stop happening.
then more humans in the future will gain those benefits that we could we could incur and we could develop on our own. Like the more people that we affect, the better people's lives become. Because right now we're still at a period of time of great chaos in the world because we really haven't figured out a lot of things. So there's a reason to be defeatist about it, but there's also a reason to think like, hey, there's so many avenues we can get into that we can help improve.
What I like about the modern world today, a lot of people look at me like I have three heads when I say that, but I'm actually extremely optimistic because of what's happening in our world today. All of these problems, all of these wars, all of this struggle, all of this despair, all of this layoffs and the economy and food prices and all this fun shit. I'm actually optimistic in the long-term trajectory of why this is all happening, because it simply means that we can't kick the can down the road any further.
So,
Our problems are in our face, and we have
this
to address them.
so when I was working in supermax and max security prisons, the biggest drive because we had similar black pill inmates, and there's a bigger reason for them to black pill over a lot of the kids nowadays. I mean, it's like they got a C on their grade, and now they completely black pill it. But like some of these inmates, what I was taught was to give them the legacy appeal, to talk about their family, and it's like how would they feel if their father had that same belief system of just gooning and not really making much money, and then because a lot of kids are mad about not having a trust fund, right? A lot
Well,
of
they have overconflated expectations of what their life could be like because they're comparing themselves to these kids on Instagram that do. And I don't even consume that content because I can feel a little twinge of envy in the back of my skull that creeps up every now and then.
right, and
It's
it's like
simply not
if they have
healthy to
that
be
twinge of
consuming
envy,
that.
it's sort of a good thing because that is the driver. It's going, okay, great.
Yeah,
If they
how do
want,
I go out and get
hold
that?
on, if they want their descendants to feel that, then it's their onus, it's their responsibility to build that, right? Like
Yeah,
if I want my
precisely.
children to benefit from that, I have to build that. And it's like because they go, what's even the purpose? What's even the goal? It's like, well, I think that they'd be really happy if they found out that their father had a $1 billion trust fund account that they were given. So like they always all of a sudden get happy and down with the purpose as soon as the money's involved. But then at the other angle, they try to pretend like money doesn't matter, but money does matter.
Yeah,
Because
of
that's
course
the
it
thing
does.
that's a part of the ego paradox where one angle they're like, oh yes, I'm gonna make a lot of money, it's gonna be great, and the other angle is like they try to have that enlightenment trap of going, I'm above money,
I'm humble,
I'm a
I'm past
yes.
it. I am postmodern, and therefore these constructs do not apply to
Yeah,
me.
this social
Yes, it's
construct of money does not apply to me. Yeah, yeah. So it's
yeah.
like all of these are just the in the moment excuse to support a deeper level habit, like I was saying before,
Oh,
with,
for
with the
sure.
question of what comes first, the distraction or the desire for the distraction, because a lot of these excuses are the distraction, and the distraction that they're excusing is excusing a behavior that they don't really want to articulate. Because it's very rare that someone says, "Oh, why should I try anyway?" We don't really ask them, do they believe that they have no choice, so that way it supports their behavior to just watch porn all day and to jerk off and just to watch Netflix and chill and not really do anything? Because a lot of times they a human will start accepting the belief system that supports their behaviors.
Hmm.
So
That makes sense.
if their behaviors are gooning, then black pill is the perfect philosophy for them.
Because it's the only philosophy that facilitates it and is like, yeah, go goon, brother. You're good.
Right, which is going to the next, which is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is avoiding autonomy. Some people know exactly what they need to do but don't do it. They feel too tired, too stuck, or unwilling to move in forward in their life. Try to motivate these individuals, and they will always have some reason for not moving ahead, which I said before, like some sort of excuse. This static existence is a way of avoiding making choices because, like I said, it's that indecision. Their choice is to not make a choice because if they don't make a choice, then they don't feel responsible for losing. They go, oh, someone else lost, not me. So if they avoid through excuses taking accountability, then now they avoid the punishment of feeling like a loser because they go, well, I wasn't losing the game because, haha, I wasn't even playing the game, which comes
Yes.
down
Yeah,
to
joke's on you guys. I've outwitted you. I
which comes
fooled you.
to another common hobby within the black pill sphere, which is trolling. Trolling is a very interesting mechanic where they cannot get attention, so they try to joke for attention. It's a attention-seeking behavior where it's also a resentment behavior. Practical jokes are resentment fueled. It's passive aggressive. This is like things that have been discovered within psychology, where when someone is
Interesting.
playing a practical joke, they really are trying to take revenge, but with ways they can get away with it, right? So
I
it's like
just like
they
setting up ambushes at my friend's Minecraft house. I don't know if there's any underlying
right,
pathology to
right,
that,
right. Where
but
it's where you want to get your get back. Maybe not for those people, but you know you can
for
get away
something
with it
else.
with those people. Like people, if a
Well, I
if
think that's the fun of humor, though, isn't it? You
well,
can
well,
say something
hear me out.
shocking or outlandish.
Hear me out. Well, in some cases it is revenge. In other cases, it might just be jovial challenges to each other to try to help each other, like build strength and stuff. But
Yeah, look at men's shit tests for resilience, for example.
right, right. Right, but in another case, it has to deal with where they resent an encounter, maybe not with the person they're even taking revenge on with. Maybe they're playing a practical joke on Antares, but really they're taking out the anger I had with someone cut me off on the freeway. So after
Right. I'm
someone
an
cut me off on the
actionable
freeway,
projection.
now I'm that anger I have is still within me and I haven't processed and found closure for that anger. So then let's say I'm playing Minecraft with Antares and then I see you have a great building that you built and then I go, oh no, he has something. I have envy of what he had built and I'm going to disguise my outburst against you as it's just a prank, bro. But really, I'm taking out that hatred I have for that person that cut me off earlier. Like sometimes people displace things even from years ago, right? There's
So
a
it's a
there's a
projection.
saying that there isn't revenge that's served too late. That there's never an expiration on well served revenge. That's a
God, that
saying.
sounds terrifying. It sounds like a bit more of a pathology that I distinguish that sort of trolling from like the trolling me and my friends used to do on Halo 3 when we'd all hop on a lobby and just scream terrible things about how we'd fuck each other's mothers and
Yeah, but what I
blow
was
up
saying is that
whorehouses.
that in of itself was resentment for being a child, because being a child is a state of lack of choice and lack of power, powerlessness of a child, where they have lack of independence. Maybe the kid was told to wash their dishes and they feel shitty about having to wash their dishes or something, right? So
So they go
like,
put it out on the game.
exactly, right. So like I said, it's like a lot of
Huh.
pranks, a lot of non-consensual pranks and practical jokes are resentment in real time. Uh, and so
That is just a fascinating thing for me because I've always been a jokester myself, but I can't really say I'm resentful of anything.
I mean
I just
that's one reason why
like fooling
I
people.
have zero tolerance for trolling on my community, because
Yeah.
it just really means that they don't really want to improve themselves. They just want to spend time wasting other people's
Wasting other
time.
people's time.
And with other another component of that is they want to spend time trying to gain attention through non-constructive means. That if they truly wanted to male shit chest another person, it would be, I bet I can do more push-ups than you. That's a perfect shit test. And it's like, oh yeah, you didn't even take a picture of yourself doing it or something, that more of shit testing, rather than I went into his Discord, I went into his server and I started posting dick pictures as a haha, that's funny. But really, it's wasting
So I
people's
wouldn't
time
even
and
call that a I wouldn't even call that a prank because there's no humor to it. There's no fun to it for the person being pranked. A really good prank shocks and awes and surprises the person in a healthy way, I'd
right,
say.
but that there isn't the eye of the beholder of the prank, right?
Sure,
So
but
like,
it's the case of the accountability of it. Like, so let's go back to my Minecraft prank, for example. So one of my favorite things to do back in the day, because my buddy was always running around and not checking the floors, I'd set up these little traps with TNT, and it would blow up a little chunk of his base, right? Now, the trick with doing that is that one, I wouldn't do it terribly often. Two, I would give him a hint that there was a trap somewhere, and he'd always miss it, which was funny as hell. But three, I would also have the materials to fix it immediately after. Because of that, those were simply just funny moments for him where he'd step somewhere, freak out, and he'd be like, "Oh, you son of a bitch, you got me." And we'd have a laugh about it. He was in on the joke. He had fun with it too. That's a good level of prankability. Just going on and just like
right, yeah,
posting clickbaiting thoughts on
there's
someone's Discord, that's
definitely
just malevolent.
right, there's definitely scale to it, right? There's like crashing a car and then being like, it's just a prank, bro.
Well, there's scope and intent. Exactly. Like
But
that
another
there's
component
something serious wrong there.
of why it's a maladaptive behavior is that a lot of times people will be wasting their energy on instant gratification, instant reactions of others, where they want to do a practical joke, they want to kind of get someone's button, they want to press another person's button, make another person angry, because
Mm.
maybe in other parts of their life they're not getting instant gratification, they're not getting instant results. Maybe they're passing their classes and the teacher doesn't even say good job. So they like don't really feel like their effort in the day actually gave them good results. Because just think of it like this: if someone's trying to get into counseling, they have to spend at least 5 years to actually start getting real money, right? Until then, they're a
Mm.
starving poor student that's struggling to try to make ends meet. And so in that way, they spend an inordinate amount of time, like tons of time studying, putting all their efforts into this stuff, and they don't see any results. But when they do practical jokes, they get instant gratification because someone's like, "How dare you do that?" Or they get, and so that's part of trolling where
I'd
they want
imagine it
that
feels
instant
very empowering.
gratification. Yes.
It feels very empowering, I'm sure, especially when you have nothing at all. That's got to be like a hit of a
And
drug.
in the same conversation we had before, when kids are on their Xbox Live lobbies, where kids most of the time don't like being kids. I know when I was a kid, I hated being a kid because I can't do anything. I can't get a car. I can't go where I want. I can't make any decision. Like my
I was
parents.
ambivalent. There were days I fucking hated it. There were other days where I'm like, oh, thank God I don't have responsibilities yet.
Right. But what I'm saying is that for a lot of kids, they do have dynamics of powerlessness where eventually
Oh, for
Their
sure.
parent says we're going to take dancing classes, and if they don't, then we don't they're going to take away our internet permissions or something like that, right?
Well, they have to live it every single day. We are required legally to attend school.
Right. So what I was saying is that usually when someone feels powerless in life, that's when they start seeking these black pill behaviors. And these
Mm.
black pill behaviors are these destructive behaviors where they're using their energy they could have used doing push ups, writing down their ideas, planning out their life, having some forethought for how am I going to apply to get that bank job? How am I going to apply to get this scholarship? How am I going to increase my earning potential? Instead, they hop around from different servers, saying racist stuff or trying to do stupid, taking bad takes just to see how people react. Like the guy named Pedro number one fan. I think he's in LC and I think he's in Homath, but I banned him
Hmm.
from my server because he's a self-described troll, and so I banned him because he told me he was a troll and that he would be giving these takes that are extremely bad perspectives, and then later on he would say he was just trolling, and so it's just not good to have a. It's like, why would I want someone like that on my server? It's like
Yeah, why invite that into your
I
home if you've
in my
carefully built
mind,
it?
I'm not thinking, man, Antares. What I really need right now is a good old-fashioned troll, like a really good
It's a good
high-level
shit
troll.
post. It's like,
Yeah,
no, I'm gonna sit
it's
down to my
like
coffee, chat with my friends, and
yeah,
I'd
and
like
it's
to cook
like
me something.
it's not like his ability to troll is like a high-skilled, difficult to perform activity. Because a lot of these people, they have these high sense of that they're a very proficient troll. So they start developing this esteem for their level 2 troll, like their ability to troll. So they start building this narrative that they're a very proficient troller because they can make people mad. But it's like they're a winner at losing. They're a
Right.
winner at being a nuisance. It's like those nuisance
It's like
TikTokers or those
it's like
nuisance.
taking you know what it is, Battle? It's taking pride in being the pigeon that shits all over the chessboard.
Right, which exactly. It's like, isn't it so funny that I ruin everybody else's time and that everybody's paying attention to me?
It's like,
So
no, we're just pissed off and we want you to leave. Get the fuck out.
so
Meanwhile, they're patting
yeah,
themselves on the back as they throw them out the door.
and
It's
so the reason why it's a
mind-boggling to me.
the reason why it's a narcissistic personality disorder mechanism is because there's two different types of narcissism. One type of narcissism is that everybody else has to suffer because I'm so important. The other type of
Hmm.
narcissism is I'll suffer for everybody else so that way I can become important.
The
Now,
martyrdom complex, I guess.
yes, it's still narcissism, right? There are people that they don't spend any energy for themselves, so they only spend energy on other people, and then their time
They're
gets
doing it
wasted,
for their own self-aggrandizement.
which is
Look
which
at
is
how amazing I am.
right, which is the narcissism within Christianity, where it's the martyrdom of like a lot of mothers. They start getting devouring personalities where they will not have their own personality. Their whole entire personality is just for their children, which sounds nice and all, but that ends up to where they're now living vicariously through their children, and now their children can't fail because they have the helicopter parents hovering over them all the time, so they can't fail on their own time.
Well, in the worst circumstances, that's when little Danny decides he's actually a Denise and starts wearing dresses, but neither here nor there.
Yeah, and the whole "mommy, don't tell me what to do" kind of a thing. Yeah,
Yeah, the devouring mother archetype is absolutely like under discussed on its severe impact in society today because we have an epidemic of single mothers raising their kids, and
right,
quite a few of them aren't exactly in the best circumstances or the fittest parent themselves. There's
right.
a reason the marriage hasn't worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, and this might be a good transition to relationship talk because we're already an hour and 38 minutes in. So
Oh my god. Yeah,
but
let's pivot a little.
yeah. So, talking about relationships, a lot of people just have a very poor ability to establish solid, like written in code, written in rules, written in on paper boundaries. That because a lot of times when a guy hangs out with a girl, the girl and the guys they start making rules for each other. They start agreeing with things, and then maybe in the moment their emotions prevent them from remembering, or maybe the girl is shit testing the guy to see whether or not the guy will even remember the rule, or if the guy is even able to apply the rule and hold her to it. And then she'll be strategic stupid, meaning she'll like pretend not to remember. And then he'll be like, no,
Hmm.
no, we made this agreement earlier. And then she'll be like, what? And so it's,
So I have a wonderful shit test that my sister uses on every prospective boyfriend she's ever had. And she's an extremely intelligent woman. She's going to find a wonderful guy someday.
hold that thought real quick. I got to use the restroom real quick and then I'll
Oh
come
yeah,
back.
sure, sure. We'll be back to you after these previous messages.
All right, I'm back. I just couldn't hold it any longer. I was holding it for like 40 minutes.
Oh shit. Well, I'm glad you said something.
Yeah, yeah.
Um
So you're talking about your
so my
sister, right?
Yeah, so she's a brilliant young woman. She's going to go solve the world's problems at some point, and I can't wait for the day she does. But she has this wonderful shit test that she uses in relationships. She doesn't like most of them because, to be honest, most of them are poorly contrived and stupid. But she just seeds a single thought to any prospective boyfriend that she has just to see if it just happens to be remembered, just in case they're actually focused on her, actually listening to her. She's testing like they're active listening. Are they thinking about what's going on with her right now in the moment, or are they just thinking about her tits? So she'll go out with these prospective guys and find the one she likes and dates, but somewhere along the line of that early dating process, she just seeds this thought and she says, "You know, I really love orange flowers. I think those are my favorite flowers in the world." And then she just lets that thought go and never brings it up again. And to this day, not a single boy she has dated has ever bought her orange flowers.
Interesting. How old is she, or what's her age range?
She's young 20s.
Oh, okay. That reminds me of
It's a very clever shit test
Well, yes, it
because
reminds me of the bird talk test or the bird vetting process, where seeing whether or not a person can talk with us about the birds near us. So, if I'm hanging out with someone and I start talking about the birds near me and they're not really engaging about the conversation with about the birds, then I now know they're not really interested in me or not interested in talking with me. But
I mean, could
that's
it
the bird
just
test.
be that they're not interested in birds?
In the same way, where is it might just be they don't like orange flowers. Has she asked them if they like orange flowers?
Interesting. I
Uh
don't know
oh.
if she's actually framed that around. I just know the anecdote that she brings up orange flowers as her test to see, like, are you actually paying attention to me
That's what
and
she
what I'm
asks. That's what
talking
she
about
asks
and
them.
what I'm interested in? She'll frame it in such a way that like her favorite kind of flower to ever get for her birthday is like orange flowers or something. And
Mm-hmm.
every time her birthday will roll around and she'll get a present, but there will be no orange flowers.
And
And
then she'll
she's like,
just break up with them.
I mean, she won't use that as a metric of breaking up with them, but she uses it. She's not so
It's another
stupid. Like
straw on the camel's back.
it's a straw of judgment she uses to make her ultimate choices, and I think it's a good telling one. It's like, okay, well, your initial sign is that he may not be paying as much attention to you as you'd like. See where it goes. Make your
So
decisions
I've been
from there.
hearing you've been using a lot of incorrect you language, and I did want to talk about that because that's another component within relationships that a lot of people are sleeping on right now.
Yeah, it's a trap for me. I noticed. I've been trying to be more aware of it since you brought it out.
Yeah, because
Um,
it's projection, and usually people that project do a lot of introjection. Introjection means they accept what other people tell them for their identity, and so not only that, but projectors think that other people function on that level, where a projector thinks that they can say you language to another person, and that other person will take what they said at face value. Another time is like when you're using incorrect you language with me. Sometimes you are talking through what your sister said to her boyfriends or her prospective suitors, which to me it's sort of lazy conversational dialectic choice, because if instead of me saying your sister says this to her prospective suitors, if I just code it to just you language here, you language there, it gets a lot more difficult to follow it. Not only that, but in prison, I learned in Supermax that the very first step to any manipulation is always in detecting the incorrect U language. And that's 100%
really,
every time. Yes. In prison,
that's where the spell gets started.
100% of the time, anytime inmate starts to do incorrect U language, instantly, that's the manipulation begin. Because it's very.
Frame it up for the discussion recording again too. Like what is the incorrect usage of you?
So if you are not speaking to me as an individuated person, if you're referring to a generalized person, if you're referring to your understanding of a certain cluster of a population,
Like a generalization.
yes. So if you are generalizing and then making me a part of that generalization, now you're speaking for me as though I'm a generalized person, which is a very insulting thing. Now, most people just kind of don't really care because they don't really understand what it means to be generalized in
But
that
doesn't that also
dimension.
open up you to disagree to say, "Oh, actually that doesn't apply to me."
Well, yeah, but most of the time when I bring that up to people and I disconnect with them instantly when they use incorrect U language, they some of them still continue to try to use incorrect U language because they don't really understand that they're what I call Borg speaking. They're speaking like I will assimilate to their understanding of you in general or you in universal, which are other ways of them trying to say what you can be used in. But if they really do mean you universal or you general, there are other terms that use that way better. And
Interesting. Like
then they
what?
say, well, what words? It's like that's on them to decide. That's on them to learn how to increase their own lexicon. If they have a very poor lexicon, it means that they have a poor ability to use vocabulary to articulate exactly what they're trying to say. Where if I say, oh, these black pillars are like this and these black pillars are like this, a projector might, instead of saying black pillar, start saying you, because it also makes the person start doing I versus they language, where it's them against the world, where they start speaking in a dichotomy schema, a worldview where
So
it's
wait,
just them versus everybody else.
so break it down for me because I'm trying to track what you're putting down.
Yeah.
So we're talking black pillars, for example, but to speak of black pillars in the plurality as a group, as an entity, to discuss the general trends of black pillology, you have to use a generality, right?
I don't have to use a generality. I can use other things.
Nice. So that's the incorrect use of the you right there.
Right. Right. It's and most of the time when someone says you, they most of the time they really mean I. But what's happening is they're doing displacement. They are having it be their interlocutor's responsibility, which means the conversational partner. So instead of them owning what they're saying, they let the other person own what they're saying. Because they don't want to own what they're saying. They don't want to own their feelings. They want acceptance from the other person. So they're saying, well, you feel angry and you feel mad when you wake up on the wrong side of the bed. They really want validation when they say those things. They want the other person to agree with how they feel rather than them say how they feel, regardless of what the other person feels. Because if I
I
feel.
agree with that, but is that necessarily malevolent? Couldn't it also simply be opening up the discussion for
So
the other
so
person to say,
it's
I
it's
agree
a
or
right
disagree with
right
that
right
statement?
right. I faced this opposition too before, which my response to this is that it's a canary in the coal mine, where it's a small tell that there's deeper issues in the caverns of their psyche.
But what if it's not? What if it's simply opening up the conversation to be right or wrong about the general statement?
Well, no, a lot of times it's so if
So let's go back to my statement, for
yeah, yeah,
example,
yeah.
where I used the incorrect you there. How would I frame that to you in a way that
Can you say it again?
shoot, I might have to go back and find the exact words.
A lot of times it's
Because I had
autopilot. A
it.
lot of times it's autopilot. I
It's
have
definitely autopilot for me. I definitely noticed that. But for me too, it's also I find I tend to use that as a way of opening up a conversation to say, here's a general statement that I find to be true. And it opens you up to be able to acknowledge that and say, yes, I also generally find that to be true, or to reject that and
so
say, actually, I see something different.
so maybe I can ask the question better. The question usually when I get to this phase with other people is, how do I know how to correct that incorrect you language? How do I use correct you language? Are there good uses of you language? So these are some of the good questions to ask, because the answer
Yeah.
to that is, if I ever incorrectly say you, I'll convert it to a question to gain alignment from my interlocutor. If I say, uh, you don't really feel that good when you drink coffee, right? So I add a comma and then a right or correct and then a question mark to
So
convert it
let's
from a
take it to a generality that we know to
because what
be
I'm doing
generally
is I'm
true.
converting it from a directive, a projection of speaking for the other person, to inquiring if they do follow that way of thinking.
So, like, take our caffeine conversation. If I chimed in with a statement like, "Yeah, if you have too much caffeine, it," well, no, I guess that's a proper use of you. But let's
so
say,
I
yeah,
wanted to
if
get
you
back into
anyone would be absolutely zany if they had too much caffeine. Would that be a improper use of you language in the sense that I'm making a generality?
if it's a generality, then use words that mean that. But what
But don't
happens
those
is,
words mean that?
you does not mean in general. If I say caffeine generally makes people they might get jitters, and so then they might need to take L-theanine to help them with the
What
jitters.
if I said caffeine can make you jittery?
Uh, I think it's good to end that with a question, because what's happening is you're speaking for my experience.
Right, but if
It
I knew
also
you
is it's
extreme
also limiting my mental milieu. I don't know if you know much about the mental milieu.
I have to look into it. I'll make a note on it. But like, so say for example, I have a good friend who I know is a fucking caffeine fiend, and I can tell when he's jonesing. If I go up to him and I say, you're jonesing for caffeine. Yeah, am I assuming where he's at? Sure, but there's also cues I can pick up to tell that he's also jonesing for a fucking caffeine dippy.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say. I think I do. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're trying to find a way of having you language be very like a nonchalant encounter of
Well, because I
of
noticed it gets used pretty frequently by a lot of people without any malicious intent behind it, but it's introspective.
right.
It's it's it
So it
is it
seems like
is
you're doing a
fundamentally a projection.
now.
It is fundamentally a projection. I agree with you, but people can be accurate with their projections.
Right, but if they are doing a prediction, they should frame it as a question rather than a statement, because that's what they're really doing. They're
But people communicate like that all the time, and people will
right,
fire
but
back if they are or
mhm.
aren't. It's just another colloquialism of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
language, I'd argue.
Right. That's what I was going to get to, is that one of the oppositions to me is that it's the colloquial way, which it being colloquial does not make it right or correct, right?
It is by sheer force of usage, though. Might becomes right in the case of language. If enough people use a word a certain way, for example, the definition will shift.
So, I mean, like when it was down to giving out the vaccine for people, where people were saying, "Oh, you got to get it," and they're saying that to me and saying it to other people. How many people does it take for it to become colloquial, where now that is the assumed status quo that now must be enforced as the norm?
Yeah, there's a certain threshold required. I'm not sure if that's
And
been
that and
measured.
that awareness of the norm comes to each individual person, where my awareness of norm and what your awareness of norm is our own milieus, where your milieu is different from my milieu. My milieu does not include incorrect U language as being a commonplace. And so
Interesting.
what's happening is what you are doing is you're placing me into your colloquial frame, but I'm not in your colloquial frame.
Right,
It
but
implies that
isn't
other
that what
people,
anyone will
hold
do?
on, it implies that your interlocutor is already within your colloquial frame.
Hmm. Frame and milieu. Sorry, I'm just writing down terms.
Frame? Schema?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, schema
Schema,
works too.
Schema. Schema.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like I said, it presumes that the norm is already your way, not mine or the other people you talk to, by assuming that, oh, it's okay because it's colloquial. Well, I don't interact with very many people that they do incorrect U language. I don't know who you talk to, but for me, that's not how it is. Now, I'm not. I resist being forced to live underneath another person's colloquial machinations, where they imagine that the world is U language, autopilot, acceptable. I don't live in that world. I think that's an inferior world that leads to introjection. Introjection is where people live underneath a function where they get their identity from others and not themselves. I live in a very individuated schema.
Yeah, see, I don't attach any of that to it whatsoever. It's just what's normal around here, I suppose. But that's also not a big deal to me. People communicate in what they're familiar with and what they're trained
Oh
in.
no,
We
you're
have to
doing a
learn.
black pill saying we said before. The black pill saying is it's not that
Is
big
that
of a
black pill?
deal. Oh
I
shit.
well, it's that it's not because it
That's a
simply
black pill
isn't.
statement. It's the beginning of the end for that behavioral loop of
I wonder so. Oh
how
no.
can I logically convince you that it is a big deal?
I mean, you can absolutely try, but at the end of the day, it's a function of what is the norm, and I operate with that
So
in that frame.
here's a question for you. When would a colloquialism be toxic enough for you to not want to participate?
It's simply a question of whether or not that thing is toxic enough for me to take notice of it. If it is toxic, it hasn't impacted me or anyone else I know that uses it on the regular.
Hmm.
Um, no, truly. I know plenty of people that might use it, plenty of people that probably do. It's something that I'll try and be more aware of and see and start to piece out if it actually is useful or if it's frustrating or whatever.
Do you have any more questions about the U language thing? Because this is like my favorite topic, but I do know that other people sometimes they get kind of tired of it.
I don't mind talking about it because it's an interesting avenue of thought I've never been approached on. You
Because I
you you are
mean,
the first person in my life, and I've been all over the
yeah,
planet that
this
gets
is
worked up about.
this is my specialty. I've written over seven
Yeah,
thousand words about it. This was beaten to my head when I worked in Supermax. That other staff members would stop talking to me the instant I would start doing incorrect U language because inmates could stab me over it because it's very depersonalizing. It's Borg speak. You will be assimilated to my colloquialism. It's very terrible in an individuated scale. Like it's very toxic philosophically speaking.
I wonder if I picked it up from the military then, which is much more like collectivist hive brained.
Yeah. It's Borg speak.
It
Yeah. I don't know
I'll,
if you
I'll
know
have to be
Borg.
more mindful of it and see. Oh yeah, I fucking love Star Trek. You kidding me? But I'll
You will
have
be
to see where
assimilated.
I'll have to see where it comes up. I also think too it's a bit of a personal peeve for you in some ways.
Well, it has very practical application that anytime I recognize someone using it, I instantly see where they have lack of processing. A lot of times when they lack processing a past history that has happened for them, they'll start using incorrect U language because they're not looking to convince me, they're looking to convince themselves through me because they want me to tell them what they tell themselves to them. So a lot of times I ask them if
Isn't that just an intelligent thing to do to affirm that what you've come to the conclusion of is correct with a peer?
but it's not to frame that the other person comes from that frame.
Interesting. Now that I think about it more and more, I wonder if
It's
it is
better to
military
say this
language
is what
because
I think. What are your thoughts on that, Antares?
that's too many words. In army speak, we must speak simple.
We must comply with TikTok brain.
Well, and there's
is
also
that what you're positing or no?
not even that it's TikTok brain, but that it's about getting your point across as quickly and efficiently and simply as possible because you're dealing with intelligent people and you're dealing with dum-dums.
So
But
you
you have
think
to
that
use
the
your
incorrect U
commonalities
language
to do
is
that.
the fastest way to accurately talk to another person after everything is considered of alternative things to say and practicing of alternative things? Because a lot of times
No, I haven't put
it's
those into practice. I'm
s-
gonna have to actually try that
so
out and try
one
what
thing
works
is
best.
that when someone you've known of the of the analogy of a person using a crutch, and then eventually if they use the crutch too much, then they
They
don't learn how
become
to walk
reliant
without
on
a
it.
crutch. Right. In the same way, where if someone always is using U language incorrectly, they now completely miss understanding other ways to articulate their ideas. Not only that, not only with others, but with themselves. They'll then start to project as a default and to interject what other people think now underneath that schema of interjection and introjection. They're telling other people what to think, and they're letting other people tell them what to think, as it bypasses the reason phase of an interaction. Because most of the U language
It's
fails to
begging the
add
question.
most of the U language
Interesting.
fails to add in the word because or so or
Right, you're
something
kind
that
of
adds
leading
in the
someone to
reason
a point.
component behind it.
So it's kind of begging the question. You're basically like ceding the point of the conversation
It
ahead of
skips the
itself.
reason phase, correct.
Okay.
Which, so like I said, it speaks for the other person. It skips the reason phase. I have like this all broken down in my in my chapter.
See, that's
It,
fascinating because I definitely know I do that. So
yeah,
I'll
it's
try to
strange
look it up and
because
catch myself in it.
a lot of people don't really like. It's almost like I'm bringing a tank to a thumb war because a lot of people, when I begin to talk to them about incorrect U language,
Well, I think it's very common.
oh yes,
I think
that
a
that's
lot
what
of people use it.
I would say the exact same thing that you're telling me, and the people in the Supermax would say yes, it is a virus that was imposed by China. With like they've got really fucking tinfoil hat on this, but they're saying that it has infected our society at a philosophical level. It's a philosophical battle that it is now that it is the status quo. It has developed prongs to stay within our psyche. Then
Interesting.
we try to pull it out. The ego says, "No, incorrect U language is me."
Because the you that you've created is the thing that's constantly needing the external proofs and validation of other people.
Right. So
But
it's a
you're also conditioned to not actually have the discussion to obtain that honestly. You're trying to seed your point.
the person who's incorrectly using U language is seeing the point and autopiloting past the subject of the sentence. So every single sentence generally has a subject and a verb, a doer and what they're doing. Now, a lot of people will sleep talk through the subject of their sentence and go straight to the doer, especially during gossiping or other things where they don't pay much attention to the subject of the sentence, but the subject of the sentence is extremely important, especially at the fundamental level in prison. In prison, the subject of the sentence matters a lot because it's in a hyperbolic chamber of personality where it's a lot more confined in how the personalities can branch themselves off and what personalities are allowed within to interact with their mental milieu. Our mental milieu, if I assume your mental milieu is not a prison, generally you might be talking to different people in maybe your workspace, maybe ex-coworkers, maybe you're talking to people on social media, maybe you're talking to people out and about when you're doing errands. Correct me if I'm wrong. And a lot of these things, when people are having this conversation to have incorrect you language or they're using you language, they fail to add in the interpersonal communication keys that's supposed to be added onto it, such as correct me if I'm wrong, or it seems like this is what you're doing, Antares. It seems like
it's
you're
giving a question to it, actually
right.
phrasing it as such.
And so a lot of people will then go, because what happens is, what I'm implying is that people that use incorrect you language are malicious manipulators. And
I think they certainly are.
And
They're
so,
not all that way, but the
so
ones that will manipulate are going to use you language. That makes a ton of sense.
correct. The people that are malicious are using that language.
Oh, but now they're just disguised in a general populace that's using it
And now
improperly.
they can say, I didn't mean it. I thought I'm just doing it colloquially. This is what everybody does.
Plausible deniability. Oh God, this is a virus. Okay,
Am I really unpacking the? I'm opening up, and there's more worms coming out.
You're making a salient point here. That makes a ton of sense. So hear me out now, because another brain blast. So just in the normal schema of our conversation, like I could be saying, if I went up to you after this and I said like, oh my gosh, we've had this great talk about you statements, but let's shift back to relationships because I know that you wanted to talk about that before it goes up. That's the improper use of the you. Am I getting that right?
So, as I said before,
Because
any
it's
incorrect
making
you
the
language
assumption.
can be converted into a correct you language, which is simple comma, right, question mark.
Literally, all I'd do in my head to flip that is, oh, hey, like we're getting up in time. Did you want to flip back to relationships?
Right?
And it's that simple. But what's funny is that my brain sees both of those as the same thing. It doesn't see the underlying maliciousness.
And that's the thing of that.
Describe that.
So to make things more conscious, we have to understand what is the subject of all of our sentences. Do we really pay attention to the subjects of our sentences? Most people, in my experience, do not. They sleep on that section. And so as soon as someone starts sleeping on 50% or 20% of their sentence, it's just a virus to start sleeping on other parts of their sentence. So if people are sleeping on 20%, so they're already... So the question is, what percentage of my statements are sleep talk, autopilot talk, and what percentage is where I'm actually consciously saying what I'm saying?
Oh, that's difficult, though. I mean, the subconscious feeds the conscious.
The unconscious does feed the conscious, right? But the idea is to understand, wait, what was the subject of my last sentence? And a lot of times people are so sleep talking that they can't even think of the last subject of their sentence. Like they can think of what I was doing, but they can't think of what was the thing that was doing the doing, which leads away from individuation and leads towards collectivism at a philosophical level. It escapes personal accountability because now it's going towards the you as the general population. What does you do?
You're never an individual.
What is the you y'all do? Not the what does you Antares do? So now when people talk to me, and if they say you to me, I treat it as though they're speaking directly to me. Now, a lot of times, lazy speakers will expect the listener to decipher their words for them. they expect the listener to decipher, okay, this U language was general use, this use was U universal, this U
This
use
one was
was just colloquial because we
singular.
just being
Yeah.
boys out here, this U language. So it's it's basically where the speaker is deferring accountability of their own speech to the listener. They're stripping their own power by making the listener responsible for what the subject of the sentence is. They are giving a ambiguous subject, which is you, which could be you, or it could be you
Or
as
the
in
broader
universal.
you.
And they're
Yeah.
letting the other person be held accountable for how to interpret it, which is
It's funny
it's
because I think that
well,
behavior has
it's
become so
bad for two
normalized, I don't
reasons.
question it.
It's bad for two reasons. It's bad because well, it's actually bad for three reasons. Because the listener might misinterpret what the speaker was intending. The speaker might be bending it based on what best serves them. The speaker might be trying to manipulate them, but then be like, oopsie, no, I was just doing it as a silly goof gaff. I really just colloquialism and not really trying to manipulate to speak for them. Another reason why it's bad is because it is leading the speaker to not be held accountable. So in speech and debate, I was taught, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's the speaker's responsibility for their own speech. That if there's a miscommunication that happens, it's always the speaker's fault. And it's the speaker's fault to find out if the listener has got it right. And one way the speaker can do that is to ask the listener if the listener can paraphrase back to the original speaker. But a lot of the speakers are terrible, lousy speakers. We have a lot of what I call spoiled speakers. And so incorrect U language is an indicator of a spoiled speaker.
Interesting.
Yeah, I go really deep on this. I go really hard.
I can tell you put in your studies. Like I'm mind boggled actually thinking about it because I think of how normalized it is in my day to day to hear people use that all the time, and we don't think anything of it. We learn
I
to
think
just
about
parse
it
it out in
every
our
day,
brains.
Antares. I think
Oh, it's
about it
gotta drive
every
you.
day.
It's gotta drive
It
you up
also,
a
it
fucking
also,
wall.
it also,
It's in our media.
it
It's
also,
in our fucking
it also leads to the garden
television.
path. Do you know the garden path?
The garden path.
The garden path. Do you know the garden path? It's the manipulation of the garden path.
No, I don't know the garden path.
The garden path, acquiescing. You know acquiescence?
I know the term acquiescence. I know the word.
So the garden path manipulation strategy within an inmate would be basically slowly implying that their target agrees with them and starts with easy agreements and slowly leads to less agreeable things that the target feels less inclined to disagree with because they've already agreed to all the other previous things.
long
And
form
so
manipulation.
it
Okay.
forces the interlocutor to have to speak up. It's because it already implies acquiescence. It forces to the listener to have to say, "Hey, hold on, no, I don't think those things." And it also another problem it leads to is it does a yes test. I don't know if you know what a yes test is.
I don't.
I'm like laying all these bombs from my material. Yes testing is basically if I try to vet a person, but all they have to do to pass my test is just to say yes, it's not a real test. So a yes test as a function might be beneficial, advantageous, or terrible and very disastrous and might kill a girl if she, oh, I asked this guy if he's a good guy and he said yes, but he ended up raping the girl or what have you, right? It's because a lot of inmates, they try to do what's called, I call it reverse yes testing, where they try to frame it where the speaker will start changing how they talk to doing a yes test to me. And now that I've forced my speaker to yes test me, I can now pass all their tests by just saying yes.
Interesting.
I don't know. This is like advanced shit. I don't know how much you understand what I'm talking about.
It's I'm grasping at the straws, but I understand what you're saying.
If
It's just I'm
if if
trying to
if
think of a
I want to
practical
if I want to
scenario in which it's
pass
implied.
if I'm a manipulator in a relationship and if I want to pass Antares's vetting process, my my best uh, my my best milieu to force you into is to give you a milieu of yes testing me. So that way, if you say things to me and the only way to pass your test is to say yes or no, then now I'm passing your tests by just saying yes or just going uh-huh. And so with you language, if you are giving me you language and I just go uh-huh, I could completely disagree with you, but I pass it by just saying yes. So it's a very poor yes test
Because it's
mechanism.
still giving you the it's
So
still
it's
giving
a
that
double.
person the
So this is
validation
what
out
I'm
of
getting
that.
to, the double-edged sword. Not only is it bad for the listener, it's also bad for the speaker. Because
Yeah.
what it means is that if someone is implying through projection what the other person thinks and feels, they're not actually getting what the other person feels and thinks because they're yes testing that person.
Okay, that is mind-blowing.
That if you are saying you language to me, for me to make it seem like I'm an agreeable person and that I agree with you and that I actually think how you think and that I am on your team, all I have to do is say,
Frame it in
yeah,
such a
bro,
way.
totally. And then bada bing, bada boom, I'm on your team. So the thing is, with incorrect you language, it's extremely
That
terrible.
makes so
No,
much sense.
hear me out. It's extremely
Oh
terrible
my
at team
God.
alignment. It's very terrible at team alignment. It's terrible at finding team alignment. It's very good for forcing team alignment, but not for faked team alignment. Because I can always fake that I'm aligning with you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And it's
How would you ever
remarkably
know?
easy to
How
do
would
so.
you ever know?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't, because all you're giving me is right there with me. Oh my God.
It goes so deep, Antares. It goes so deep.
Unbelievable.
It goes so deep. It's the number one battlefield philosophy that I'm working on right now, and it is absolutely like almost every single conversation, one I have recorded, I always get into it because almost every single person is infected with this virus. It's the Borg
Yeah,
virus.
that's horrifying that it's so everyone uses it. It's so
Everybody
ubiquitous.
has been unconsciously uh,
Borgified.
placed into a milieu of unconscious manipulation of others through the lack of understanding of individuated
Individuated language.
of individuated language, of personalizing themselves as an individuated person away from someone else.
Yeah, God, like using that, you're not even framing yourself as yourself in those conversations, are you?
Uh-oh. You're doing your language again.
Well, I'm asking you a question. There's a question mark at the end of that, are you? You're not even framing yourself at the end of that, are you?
I'm not framing myself at the end of it. Right, like I said, a incorrect you language, like I said, the canary in the coal mine, it displays a lack of I language. I'll let that sink in a little bit. Incorrect you language displays a lack of I language, the lack of who am I. Think of how many black
there are
pillars
no
out there.
standardized
Like,
statements.
think of how many black pillars are out there that are thinking, who am I? What is my purpose? What is the purpose of I?
No one. Oh my God, you're right. They're all thinking in these broad universal use.
Correct. They're
And
not.
they're thinking of themselves in that
Yeah.
context too. I am just part of one of the many use.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's a fucking
Yeah.
collectivist.
Like I
virus.
said, this is a hinge of the entire black pill is the I versus you language, and this isn't Gestalt therapy. Like, this is therapy where they teach people in Gestalt therapy to confront people every time they use incorrect you language, because Gestalt
That
therapy
is
back during
remarkable.
1920 this was a thing.
I clearly need it because I need to be deprogrammed too. I've got a little element of the Borg virus in me.
Yeah. So, like, I'm
That's
really glad I could touch
wild.
on this, and some people they get really burnt out of it because they're so in the have the viruses just has the hooks in them that they have to constantly be like, "All my friends do it," which isn't that a fallacy? Most of their arguments are all come down to
Everybody's
a
doing it.
fallacy. All of it comes down
Everybody's
to a
doing it.
fallacy. It's a fallacy.
I think it's more for I think it's more in the context of what you want to get out of a conversation and interaction. If it turns into a breakdown of you, I can understand
So
why
I'm
some
gonna
people
I'm
may
gonna
be
agree with your
perturbed.
you language right there that it does depend. Yes, it does depend on what I want out of the relationship with a person. If I'm talking to the bank teller and I'm just like I just want to deposit my money and get the fuck out, I'm not really going to be with them very long. I don't really care to correct these people in their incorrect speeches. But if I expect to hang out with Antares on an often basis, then I'm going to correct him every single time because I will intellectually challenge people that I respect intellectually. If I don't intellectually challenge you, it means I don't respect you intellectually enough
Yeah, it
to.
means you've given up on me.
Yeah, if I stop challenging you, it means that I have given up on you.
So would that be an improper use of you that I just did?
Can you repeat it?
Just in the sense that like I agreed with your statement, but I sort of rephrased it from the context of you saying it.
I guess. So a big issue that I have is that a lot of times I'm gotten so used to like completely deleting it out of my virus of my mind that it's almost like I just have no memory whenever someone says incorrect U language, except for like in the moment, and then like me thinking back a little bit, I can't remember it. So that's why I always like to ask the
Hmm.
person if they can remember. A
Yeah,
lot
you
of
have to
times,
capture
if
it in the
the if
moment. I
they,
need to be
hey,
more
let me
aware
ask you
of it.
this question: if the speaker cannot remember their own idea, then how can we expect the listener to expect to remember the speaker's idea?
That's a very good point. I think that's fair.
A lot of the times, the ego is arguing not from a state of a foundation. Usually, the ego is arguing by winging it. And
I
that's
would
why the
argue
ego.
most of life is winging it.
So that's why the ego has a very difficult time backtracking even a sentence or two sentences prior because it's just winging it. It doesn't actually have a foundation of going, okay, we were talking about fear of missing out. We're talking about a fear of failure. And the fear of failure does relate to not just failing oneself, but failing the Borg collective. And so that's like in my Battlefield Philosophy server, we're talking about JPJ was bringing up a person's fear of what other people think about him. And he's a huge misuser of U language. And that's possibly because he cares an exorbitant amount of time about what other people think about him. Like, he needs to know what you think about him. He needs to know what I think about him. He needs to know what his mom thinks about him. He needs to know what everybody else thinks about him. However, he spends very low amount of time thinking about what he thinks about him because it's that lack of I in his own mind.
That makes a ton of sense. It's shocking how common I think that philosophy is. Just that sensibility, I guess, of using delineating your own sense of self.
Delineating one's own sense of self. I'm telling you, it's super lazy. It's like it's almost like when someone says too much, for them to stop saying
Yes.
they have to start saying more with consciousness so they can realize that they're unconsciously saying and they're unconsciously saying you. So for me to stop saying you incorrectly, I have to sometimes say you. So I'm consciously saying you. So it brings the you language to my conscious. So that way I can consciously avoid saying you and use the correct subject of that sentence.
When you do it, it makes you speak more intentionally.
It makes me speak more
Is that
intentionally.
correct?
Correct. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Because the
See, I
goal,
caught myself
like,
in that you statement.
correct
I
me,
made a statement
correct me if I'm
waiting for you to
wrong.
correct me, and then
Correct
I
me if
added the question.
correct me if I'm wrong in our value system, but I'm pretty sure both you and I want to be more intentional individuals. Correct.
Correct.
So to be more intentional individuals, we have to be more intentional about the language that we use, especially for the subject of what we're talking about. That
Yeah. I mean, you're tugging at it's a seemingly innocuous thing that is just the tip of a linguistic iceberg.
now I'm gonna make this analogous to drinking water. Here we go. You might be thinking, what is Battlefield philosophy talking about now?
Yeah,
But
what do you have, a metaphor?
yes, so with water drinking, a lot of people that are lacking drinking enough water, it's not like in their mind they're thinking that drinking water is terrible. It's not like they're against drinking water. It's more of their mind sees drinking water as so boring, non prioritized, normal, mundane that they move drinking water to their unconscious processes rather than moving it to thinking forced fluids means to drink water when I don't feel like it, to force myself to consciously seek out water rather than waiting until oopsie daisy, I drink some water. Oopsie, I drink some water. It's like, no, we have to consciously move drinking water to our frontal lobe, like literally in our mind, visualize. Like for me, in my mind, I have to visualize that idea go from the back of my head to the front of my head, where that decision can take action within the striatum of the brain.
Execute waterdrink.exe.
Yeah, because the striatum is, I believe, in more the front of the frontal lobe. The striatum is the decision-making part of the brain, which is like a muscle, so to speak. The brain is almost like a muscle, and how it performs, on how it gets stronger or weaker neuroplastically. I don't know if you were able to follow me there.
Not completely, no, but I understand that there's a lot of complicated pieces of the brain at work in facilitating something as simple as drinking water.
Yeah, so what the sentence I used there came from two different books that are each 16 hours long.
Damn, son.
Damn, so much to find this. Yeah, so the two books. One book, it's called How the Brain Changes Itself, and it talks about how they experimented on monkeys, cut off their fingers, learned how the brain is neuroplastic. And the other brain is, I think, Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg. And that book talks about the striatum, about how a lot of people in the military, they get striatum damage. And that's why
yeah, we keep getting rocked by IEDs.
No, so striatum damage comes from being in a state of powerlessness, of like that level 1 consciousness that I was talking to you about before.
Oh God, the state of paranoia of constantly getting artilleried.
No. The being told by the commanding officer what to do and having no choice about it.
Oh yeah, that's always fun.
So, well, that's sarcasm, but
it is.
Sarcasm is another defensive mechanism that's very toxic. Oh my gosh, we're gonna break into my soapbox about sarcasm.
We're hitting all your soapboxes tonight. So sarcasm is also an underlying.
Sarcasm
it is fundamentally a deflection. I agree.
Sarcasm, I say, is the speech of a defeatist man.
I guess that makes sense in the context of talking.
They have given up. I'm like reading it
me.
from my own mind. I have like a book in my mind. So
Yeah.
the defeated man, after he gives up on his ability to persuade someone through rational means, through logical means, he then tries to find humor to try to inspire change in the others around them. Also,
that makes a ton of sense that sarcasm is such a popular language in the Army.
And its sarcasm is really huge in Blackpill, getting it back to Blackpill.
Yes.
Because that's the trolling mechanism. The trolling is it's just sarcastic, ha ha, he he, ha ha. They're playing a game.
There's something serious.
They're playing a game that does not involve persuasion. those
That
some of those same
makes
people. Oh, this is another
sense.
soapbox about how people have an aversion to learning about how to persuade. They think that persuasion is manipulation, but persuasion is just about appealing to self-interests of others.
That's a manipulation of sorts, I would tend to
Right, but
agree, but there can be positive manipulation too when
correct,
I
correct,
encourage somebody to better themselves.
correct, correct. But we're about 2.5 hours in. I wanted to know if there's anything that you want to wrap a bow on. If there's anything, because I want to have some. I want to like end it at 3 hours.
Yeah, we
No,
have just
no more than 3 hours. But I wanted to see if we had anything else you wanted to touch into.
yeah, sure. I Do you want to take 10 more minutes and we can kind of wind down and just center it all back on the black pill stuff? Because I think you've covered quite a bit of ground today.
Yeah. Um, the one thing I wanted to touch base on, because we kind of discussed this already. So getting it back to the best question I think you asked, Antares, and I hope that you can ask me, or you can tell me the best question that I asked you. But the best question I think you asked was the black pillar out there, the John Doe out there. What should we tell that guy? What should we tell the black pillar that's trying to not be a black pillar anymore?
Yeah, where do we start with that one black pill guy, that average fucking black pillar that just has that little
Yeah.
kernel of something
What do
you
we
might be
do
able
with
to
a
ignite?
Kyle that just wants to punch walls and drink Mountain Dew all day?
Yep.
So my idea is that to ask him, when does he know when he's a loser in life, and how does he develop a quota that he can measure when he's a loser? Because a lot of the times these black pillars, they have not created an understanding for the habits they have in life that there is no winner or loser in it, and they have to stop participating in the habits where they cannot improve upon because there is no negative feedback loop.
So, question: you don't think these black pillar types don't already know they're losers?
I think that they know they're losers, but I don't think they understand how to measure if they're a greater loser than they were yesterday.
Okay.
So if today they're still a loser, but they're a third of the loser as they were yesterday, how would they know? How would they know if they're less of a loser? So that's the thing, is like when someone makes ground of being less of a loser, a lot of people have a difficult time. So it's like they have imposter syndrome, where they believe that them getting better and losing less, they feel like they're still a loser because they're stuck as a loser, and they're not realizing, wait, hold on a second. Today I did 100 push-ups. Today I listened to 10 minutes of a book. Today I talked to 3 different girls and none of them gave me their number. Well, that's still something that can be measured. So that's why having those objectified goals of, say, having these objectives of calling 5 different people, recording myself talk to myself for 10 minutes, and then listening to myself talk to myself for 10 minutes so I can better understand myself. So a lot of these people, they have an issue of communicating with themselves. They don't know how to communicate with themselves when they lost. They don't know how to communicate if they lost more than they did yesterday or less than they did yesterday. They have no real way to measure that. I'm going to kind of get your responses on that because I kind of went on a tangent.
No, you're fine. It answers the question perfectly. I guess a follow-up question to that, though, is that if one of the main signs of black pill syndrome is this general lack of ability to compare and to set goals, I'm just trying to frame sort of the root of it in my head real quick here.
While you think of that, I want to do a quick key to all the listeners that if any time
Oh,
I do incorrect Yule language, definitely let me know in the comments, because I always like to be held to it, because sometimes I
it for
do
me,
it
too.
and then people get really upset at me and they're like, got you, see? Even Battlefield Philosophy doesn't do it. He doesn't even do his own thing. That's one thing part of the Black Pillars that do, is they like try to find one failure to try to discount the whole entire theory.
Don't worry, all you listeners totally have me covered. I know that was improper use.
Yeah, that's the,
with you.
yeah.
Circling back to my question though, if these black pillars fundamentally one of their main symptoms is a lack and inability to I'm trying to describe the mechanisms at play here. It's such a complex cocktail. Is it that their reward mechanism for taking action is just fundamentally not there? Have they deadened that impulse to like give themselves the little congratulatory ego boosts of I made the phone call. I brushed my teeth. I did that thing. And they're just not actually getting that biochemical flare up in the head?
I think they're not. They're not telling themselves good stories about themselves. They tell themselves bad stories about themselves.
Their narrative is
There's called
internally all fucked up.
there's called the button push method. I don't know if you know the button push method.
Got another note?
The button push method, I might have it termed incorrectly, but it's a technique used in therapy with patients. But we can think of it like this, where in our life there's things that push our button that make us feel mad, that make us feel sad, right? We might see a dog get abused on TikTok and now we're mad, or now we're sad, and that pushed our button. Well, guess what? There's also things that push our buttons in a good way. So we have to find the good things in our mind that push our buttons, the good buttons of like, what really drives us? Like, what button can we press in ourselves that make us fired up? We call them mantras of like, I'm going to be, I'm the best in the world. I have the biggest cock in my universe because mine is the only one that matters, right? These type of things we can tell ourselves that kind of is our own hype man.
The big dick energy.
Big dick energy, right. So a lot of people lack those stories, and then every time they do get a win, after they get the win, they kind of forget the win a lot of the times. But it's like, write down the win, and every time that they feel bad, open up the paper of all the wins they've completed. Of like, for example, for me, some of my buttons is like, I've saved people's lives. Literally, they were not breathing, they had no pulse. I gave them Narcan, and they came back to it. And so I know that me living has led to other people living. Now, those people might be kind of shitty people, sure. But but then again, it's like...
But you've demonstrably proven... That's a bit of a Rubicon, though. Like, it speaks again to what we discussed earlier with the idea of, like, the male rites of passage being absent in society. Saving someone's life, I think, is a tremendous rite of passage.
Now, when you say Rubicon, can you help me understand that? Because I might not understand that.
It's the metaphor. So crossing the Rubicon, back in the Roman Civil War era, Caesar crossed the Rubicon infamously, declaring his intent to turn on Rome and to go to war with Rome.
Yeah.
But,
interesting. Yeah, it's like
the metaphor if you cross the Rubicon is like a point of no it's a point of no return.
It's the story that's strong enough to prove that I'm not a nobody.
Yes, you can hold that story up to anyone definitively and be like, I saved someone's life.
Yeah, I stuffed it up his nose, and yeah, and plenty of inmates gave me the N-word pass, but I still don't use it.
That's a good decision. Oh, it's funny as hell.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think there is a lack of Rubicons, I suppose, that are available to a lot of these men these days.
Yes. Yeah.
And most Rubicons that used to be don't really feel like it anymore.
Well, I mean, think of it like this.
What is graduating high school? It's fucking nothing.
Well, I mean,
these days.
The thing is that there's Rubicons everywhere, but they don't know where to find them. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know how to ask the question. Like when I went to Supermax, when I worked in Supermax, the mentors did not want to talk to me. They did not want to listen to me for anything. Every time I talked to them, they would tell me that me being 23 years old at the time, I was too young to know anything that they didn't already know. Every single thing I told them, they told me that they were working in the prison industry for longer than I've been born. Every time they listened to me, they got stupider. This is what they would tell me, straight up. And then they said that the best transaction of information from mentor to pupil is for the pupil to ask questions and for the mentor to answer that question. And the only way to reverse the role is for the pupil to ask a question that the mentor cannot answer. And so they said that until I can challenge them with a worthy question, they don't want to hear my answers. And so I had to learn how to ask some very extremely existential questions of life for me to earn the intellectual right to tell these staff members in Supermax prison what I thought. Because people are defined by the questions they ask. And so if a person cannot ask any good questions, that's the first step, is to force someone to ask good questions before actually giving a fuck about what they think. Because how can we care about what someone thinks if they don't even know what question they're answering with their answers? It's like
Well, it's
we
a
can
sign that
we can
they're
have
yeah.
all the answers to all the wrong questions.
Well, I think it's simply just kind of like what you touched on with the you statements. It's a mind that is not settled in itself. It does not have an individual decided upon coherent line of identity that it can look back
Right,
on and
and that's
reference
and
and
that's
see.
why it's a canary in the coal mine for whenever someone uses incorrect U language. I now know whatever they're telling me about, they have a lack of processing at best, malicious at worst.
It's just an undeveloped line of thinking.
Right, it's either they're unprocessed or they are malicious. They're negligent or they are manipulative. That's pretty much how I sort them.
There you have
they're
it,
they're
folks.
stupid or intentionally stupid. They have undeveloped I, or they're trying to force the you into me.
Where does somebody start when they have not yet developed that sense of ego? I think that having a discipline, something that you record, something that you can track and reference back to, is a fantastic first start.
Right.
But
That's
where
so.
do they
Yeah.
go
That's
into?
yeah.
They gotta
So
look in
so
the mirror
I
at
can answer
some
that. I
point.
can answer that question. So because you're asking me a lot of good questions, which is like really helping me understand that you're a really smart person because you're asking a lot of really good questions. Where can someone start? So one thing I was told when I was going through psychiatric technology trade school is they told me that the people that have the highest chance of being manipulated, not only by others but also by themselves, is for them to become more introspective, which means for them to talk to themselves, which involves writing down what they think, to looking at what they think, to understand, holding a mirror to their mind. And holding a mirror to the mind involves writing and recording oneself talk, talking to a microphone, talking to a video recording of oneself for about 5 minutes when they first start, then playing it back to oneself for 5 minutes and watching it and taking notes about the qualities that the person notices, because almost everybody has insufferable qualities about how they speak. I have insufferable qualities about how I speak, and every time I listen to myself, I hear it. And so a lot of people never go through that rite of passage of listening to themselves speak, and that's a Rubicon. There's a Rubicon of being able to listen to oneself speak for a whole hour straight with no notes.
To
Just
not be distracted by your own sense of being.
by not being distracted by one's
Huh.
own self of being, well, like not having external stimuli, having only internal stimuli leading the way.
Oof. I honestly don't think most people would be capable of that.
Most people have
I'm
not.
not sure I would if
Most
you locked me
people.
in a box and threw a journal in after me.
Most people have not done 30 minutes of mental exploration in their whole entire life, and for a lot of people, they never will.
What do you think about the people that are said to have no internal dialogue whatsoever? Like for myself, for example, I have an internal dialogue with my sense of self. I
I
ask
think that's. I
myself
think that's a. I
questions.
think
I
that's a.
answer
That.
them
I think
back. I go back.
that's. I think there's a lot of factors to that. I think that opens a whole nother soapbox. The
Okay.
people that have
Perhaps
the lack
for
of.
another episode then.
Yeah. Because it's like that gets into like maybe they're on a drug, maybe the lack of sleep, maybe that's how they were coached during their childhood, maybe that, maybe they taught themselves wrong on purpose or on accident, incidentally. Maybe they are telling in like falsities about how they think. Maybe they don't realize how to articulate themselves to themselves.
I
They
just suspect there's a
and so
certain measure of
I
the
wanted to I
population
wanted
that
to
just
continue
doesn't.
about the John Doe analogy, the Kyles out there
Yeah.
with the black pills, right? Where it's recording 5 minutes of talking to oneself about what they want, who they are, which this is why in my Discord server I have the introduction be 175 words long, and then I have them talk for around an hour to 2 hours long with me to try to like really get down to what they think and challenge them, and then to try to get a personal accountability coach or a personal accountability partner to hold them accountable, because a lot of times people cannot hold themselves accountable, and they have to face themselves with that fact. A lot of people cannot admit that they lack the capacity to hold themselves accountable, which is big sad, but if they keep denying it, then they can't accept it. As soon as someone
Right.
can
And if they can't
accept
accept it, they can't
as
change.
soon as they can accept that they've reached the point that they cannot hold themselves accountable, then they can accept that, okay, now they can go to the next step of what if they can't hold themselves accountable? At this current rate of going, they won't be able to in their current reality tunnel. Reality tunnel is a whole nother philosophy term. Um, reality tunnel. I don't know if you know what that term is, but
No. I'll look it up. Or if you can explain real quick.
oh man, it's
Reality tunnel. I'm adding all sorts of notes tonight.
it's relates to like telepathy and empathy and ESP and like these really deep, high level, advanced way of thinking, and so that's why I don't
Like
like to get into it.
noosphere or something like that.
Huh?
Like noosphere or something
I
like
don't know
that.
what noosphere is.
I'd I'd have to look it up, but it's the kind of idea of like a
So,
gestalt collective
reality
unconscious.
tunnel. It's heavily discussed within the book called Cosmic Trigger One.
Hmm.
And that book, he discusses it, but that's an advanced book. I don't recommend that book be the first book someone does. The guy takes a lot of LSD and he has a lot of crazy ideas, but he also has a lot of really, 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 really interesting ideas. So reality tunnel has to deal with understanding the telemetry of where our life will be for every single action that we do in any given day. That
Hmm.
if I walk out of my house today and walk around the neighborhood and walk back to my house, how will that affect the rest of my life and my reality tunnel? Versus if I were to just jack off and then pass out for the rest of the day, how is that going to affect the rest of my life in that reality tunnel? So it's
It,
understanding, huh?
sounds like cause. It sounds like trying to like grasp the dragon's tail of
Well,
causality
so
for
reality is like how the world
all your
is,
actions.
and tunnel is like the shaping of our reality is shaped through a tunnel of the now. So every
Hmm.
now we are mining our future. It's like a lot of these very analogous terms of like mining and tunnel of our own life, and but yeah, man, I could talk forever. Like my whole entire book is over 24 hours long. But like I
Nice.
said, like every half a page is 1 mile of mental exploration. Uh, And so if someone can write a half a page every day, that means they're going 1 mile per day of mental exploration introspectively.
How many people do you think get filtered out just by having to write 175 words?
Out of what population? Out of the people that come into my server, or like if I were to face a person in Starbucks?
I suppose that we could start with your server, but let's broaden it out to the world at large. If you sat in a Starbucks and
Because
asked
like there's
somebody to give you
people in Russia
175 words,
which so the thing is about when we appeal to the colloquialism, which is like appeal to popularity but with just extra more syllables in that term,
mm,
uh, then it's not understanding that every single culture has their own colloquial mannerisms. Like Russia, they don't allow people to smile. Like smiling is a very big no-no in Russia, right? So
mhm.
when it comes to America,
I mean, I
they
wouldn't smile if I was Russian either.
so in America they've gotten a lot more TikTok brain, while in other cultures that maybe have banned TikTok, or their version of TikTok is like the healthy version where they only show like, "Hi, I'm a plumber. This is how I solve this problem, and this is let me explain
China.
it in like."
You're talking about China. I've been there. That's
Yeah,
what they
yeah,
do.
yeah. It's like they do cut jumps to just show the exact points that decisions are needed to solve that problem. But anyway, yeah. So to answer your question how to deal with how many people would be filtered out with the inability to do that. And so it has to
Yeah.
deal with willingness and unwillingness, and it's like capability versus incapable. I think that people are capable, but they're just not
Generally unwilling.
not they are capable, but I mean there's the people that are like cerebral palsy, like they have literal developmental disabilities. So if we don't count those developmental disability people, we count the people that are like above 100 IQ, right? Um, those people, I would say a percentage of them that are unwilling, because that's really what we're talking about right now. The people that are unwilling versus the people that are willing. Because everybody that's willing
Right.
to actually see it through will actually see it through. But the people that are unwilling, I think it's their ego in their way. And I think it's probably, I would say it's around 40% of people that have that narcissism. Because it's a narcissism trait.
That
Other
makes
people have
sense.
to
But it wouldn't
suffer.
would it be it's not full blown narcissism,
No,
but it's
it is it
narcissistic
is it is it is
tendencies.
it is narcissism. It's other people have to suffer my language for me.
Oof, that's a brutal castigation of the 40% of the population.
But I mean that you asked me what I thought, but I do think it's around 40%.
Yeah, it's remarkable though.
What do you
So
think the percentage
40% of
is? What do
people.
you think it is?
I would probably peg it around. I was actually thinking you're being a little forgiving. I'm going to say 60%. I would say 60% of people would not give enough of a flying fuck to put down 175 words. Not because they're incapable,
Right. And
but
then
because
there's
they're entirely unwilling.
like a scale system to like uh those people that are try to be appealed to. We try to appeal to them for like maybe 10 minutes versus be like have a 5-minute conversation versus just like a flat out, hey, come to my server and do this 175 word thing. uh but yeah, it's
That's a different dynamic,
but
sure.
for me, I like to try to think of how to bring that 60%, what percentage of that 60% I can actually reach if I tried. Because I do think of that 60%, I could probably reach probably 60% of those 60%, and those other 40% are probably just too busy doing meth or whatever.
Hmm. I do have one more question. I think that'll kind of wrap up my thoughts on it because I can already feel my brain starting to smoke.
Okay.
But do you think if conceivably, if we were somehow able to come up with a cure for black pill in a lab, let's say,
Yeah.
and distribute it out, we've managed to cure the black pill. We've created the perfect clear pill.
Uh huh.
Do you think even if everyone took it, there would actually be enough opportunity out there present for everyone to go actualize on that?
I think maybe the better question has to do with what's the efficacy rates.
That's the more realistic take, I think.
Right. So, like, if I apply this clear pill to a person, what's the chances that it has a seed that maybe they don't change now, but maybe it grows within their mind and their unconscious that eventually come around to it? Because for a lot of people, I might talk to them and they might poo-poo me. They might say, "Oh, that guy's full of shit," but then maybe 2 years from then, the guy reaches out to me and says, "Oh, hey, I've been thinking a lot about this, and what book should I go into?" Blah blah blah. So sometimes a success might be seen first as a failure, but really, there's sometimes it's just a seed. So the idea is, what is the perfect seed to plant? Regardless if it's an instant gratification of like, oh yeah, you've helped me. I'm not a black pill person no more. It's like,
Right.
what is the best seed to plant for someone to help grow their interest and willingness to commit to themselves, to be accountable, to not want to be a nobody no more. And yes,
That makes sense.
and
Yeah, if you're going to plant a good seed, you got to make sure you have good soil.
well, some seeds can grow in some of the shittiest soil out there, and some seeds
Also
prefer
true.
bad soil. So,
That
uh,
makes a ton of sense.
so, like I'm saying, is that I do think that in my book, I'm actually writing about a lot of things that I need to apply, and doing more of our conversations like this allows us to open up this conversation more. And I'm sure we're going to listen to this and take notes, and then try to condense some of our main points, and then do like another conversation, but only pretty much surgically sniper those points and try to condense them, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We can continue to organize and better define points. I mean, I know for my own case, I'm going to have several different key questions and points that I can bring out of what we talked about today.
Right, because I mean, I'm still looking for a worthy opponent against my U language. So,
Well, I don't want to be an opponent of it.
oh yeah,
I want to support it. You've absolutely convinced me that you language is vile, insidious, and incestuous. It's nested everywhere.
Gosh.
You made
It
some
is.
perfect arguments today.
It's the
But
like it's like this. Think about it like this, Antares. Imagine if AI thought that U language should be the way that people are only supposed to talk, and were to take out I language.
who's to say they already haven't?
Yeah. Well, just think of it like this. I mean, a lot of these algorithms, I mean, the people that are working on them are not dumb.
No, they are the most brilliant psychologists and healers we could have ever had are now working for Facebook, making an algorithm to make more money.
One thing I regret about my book. So when ChatGPT first came out, I mean, when they first allowed me to like upload a certain document, I uploaded one of my documents onto it, and that document I uploaded onto it was my chapter about scare mechanics. So basically, I uploaded like every single way that I've learned that people can scare each other, in like from what I learned with inmate to inmate interpersonal communication, like things that spook people, things that make people get completely frightened, that I've learned not to use because I lose friends by using this stuff. Uh, I I wonder if ChatGPT now has it, and it's somewhere within the algorithm of now it has a prison professionals, psych professionals, 10-year journal, concise encapsulation of the best ways to absolutely scare the shit out of somebody.
I'd say that'd be a pretty interesting read.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think I want to do a close on this. I do know we didn't really get too deep into
Sure.
we didn't get too deep into boundaries stuff, because it kind of goes right back to the black pill stuff, because a large portion of it is that the females are looking for a guy that's not a black pill. Like, girls don't go, oh yes, this guy's a black pill, I like this guy. No girl has ever I mean, I don't think there's any girl that like absolutely loves that the guy is a black pill.
No,
In this
no
in
girl
the
is ever gonna
same
get wet
way
over a
that
fucking loser.
in the same way that the guy doesn't go, oh wow, this girl, she's super into like climate change and veganism and like all this like feminism stuff. Like, most guys, it completely turns them off. Or like if a girl says the statement of like, if you you know, the different types of statements that girls do that are their earthquakes. I haven't even gotten into earthquakes. Holy shit.
Hold on, earthquakes? I'm
Yeah.
genuinely curious. We can cover it at a later date, but you at least have to give me a tidbit. What the hell do you mean?
Earthquakes are mechanisms of disqualifying the other person. So I'll give you one example of an
6
earthquake.
feet tall,
I'll give you an
something
example
like
of an earthquake that's very common with the female psyche, saying something like, well, that's just your opinion. Or something like, well, we just all have to, that's just, you know, everybody's the same.
Well, those are thought-terminating cliches.
Right, and those are earthquake. Those are defined as earthquakes in my schema, where what they've learned is when they start to lose the arguments, they'd
can
rather
end it with
everybody
that.
lose than only her lose.
Yeah, you do see a lot of
because
those.
now what's happening is they convert from playing a game where there's winner loser of the game that they're playing before, which is a logical argument. Now they're playing the game of, can I completely terminate this conversation? And if they win that, in their mind they're a winner, even though they terminated the conversation. So
Yeah,
another
no
type of
resolution was ever
so
released, but
another
they got
type
the
of
last
earthquake
word.
is saying, oh, this conversation is
Ugh.
too confusing to understand. This conversation is too confusing for any of us to understand.
Oh God, it's just the black pill for the opposite sex.
Yeah. Yep. Earthquaking is the opposite sex way. It's the way of defeating logos to go to ethos or pathos. Pathos is like feelings and trying to get guys to panic, so that way it cheats logic. And oh man, I can talk for days about this.
Well, I suppose that's the point of these whole conversations. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
because what I've learned is like I have so much content and I don't even know where to begin.
It starts with this. It
Yeah.
really does.
Yeah, so that's why I do this, and then the content kind of gets pronounced. I try to work on more, and then I'll try to release as like a reference guide, so that way we can start to go, okay, which excuse is this person using? He's using excuse number 3. So there was a person that told me that my modality of psychology seems to be like I'm trying to make philosophy into McDonald's. I'm trying to McDonaldize
I'll
philosophy.
take a number 21 anti-black pill, please.
Exactly. I'm trying to take a number 3 anti-shit testing. Yep.
I mean, in some ways, though, that would be the most effective means of treatment for people. It's
Yeah.
people aren't
So
looking for
basically,
anything
I'd be
extraneous.
like,
There's like, tell me about this.
I'd basically be selling the different tools on like a in like a package.
Right.
So it'd be like, and they'd be very condensed, very concise, very straight to the point. Boom, bam, slam it. Like, but like if someone listens to me in a long form, they kind of have to like take their own notes and like learn about things. But like my packets would basically be like 1, 2, 3, 4. This is that. This is that. This is that. This is that. This is the exact phrase prescription. I call it PP for short. The phrase prescription. Some PP is bigger than others. Some phrase prescriptions are better than others. But yeah, I've been doing this for so long. I have like I call it the Willy Wonka effect, where I've been making chocolate for so long that's so good, but I've never really actually introduced it to the public. And so it's like, at this certain point, I'm almost like in an island because only I can really understand me based on all the introspection I've done. Because it's very rare to find someone that's done as much introspection as I've done.
I think it's an absolute anomaly. So you have all your points defined. You just need to be doing what you're doing here now as a way of you got to start spreading the word now. It's time to start engaging that greater public.
Right, and then also like the small sections of when I like made a really really good nest egg point that made you go, oh wow, for like the U language thing. I got to cut that into like a couple minute point, right? I have to cut it into a 10-minute point maybe, a 60-second thing, so to help funnel people into my server. And
Food for thought too, if you wanted to do it, but some stuff that I've seen other people do is they'll take a long form conversation like this, distill it down into its core points where they can organize it, and then they turn it into a lecture or presentation that's 5-10 minutes long.
Yeah. I mean that's what Myron Gaines does with his Why Women Deserve Less book, where he takes all of his arguments that he can condense and he places it into a 2-hour long book that basically goes back to back to back to back to back to all the arguments that he does on his podcast.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's basically like for me, where eventually I'm going to be releasing content where it's like back to back to back to back of all my main points. So when I go into podcasts, for the people that don't read my material, I'll be basically running circles around them, and then they'll want to read my material so that way they can like catch up to me, because I'm just leagues ahead of everybody. Like I'm used to facing a psychopathic serial killer like psychopath that takes notes about how to manipulate me every single day to how to overcome me. And the number one tool is focus on when the incorrect U language is used. That's the number one tool when talking to the most manipulative people on planet Earth. In Supermax, in Death Row, in Max
In
Security
a
Mental
boardroom.
Hospital for Criminally Insane. What was that?
In a boardroom.
In a boardroom with a girl that's trying to compel panic in her interlocutors to try to emotionally manipulate other people. Like, it's a lot of my tactics are like bringing a tank to a thumb war, and so that's why my biggest issue is trying to learn how to like decrease the potency to not make it so intense, because a lot of people it kind of like turns them off because it's just so intense.
Well, it could be overwhelming. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's understandable.
So I was going to kind of close this up because we're now over 3 hours. So
Nice. We hit our 3-hour mark.
yes,
There you
sir.
go.
Any final remarks?
None. Just that I suppose if there was anything I could impress upon like a Blackpill listener or something like that, there's so much that you can do to get yourself away from that attitude and those thoughts and those beliefs and those circumstances. But it starts with a single step, like we've been discussing here. Start journaling, start making the little changes.
Yeah, my main thing is commit to being a somebody. Now, who that somebody is, that's part of the journey, and to write about it. Write who the I is and talk about it, record it, and listen to what each individual is saying about what they think, and then try to remove the parts of oneself that is limiting progression. When someone does limiting language, add on yet to the end, so that way it's not like I can't do this, say I can't do this yet. So there's just so many things out there, and it's very narcissistic to think that an individual has already thought of everything in life and then now they should give up. Like, that's the narcissistic level of the black pill, to think that they've already explored all their options. Have they, though? Have they already explored all the options? That's just them thinking that they're too important to look at other people's ideas.
They may have ruled out the easy options around them, but
They want
there's
to
always
unconsciously win, and
Mhm.
winning requires conscious losing, being willing to lose, and then knowing how to lose in a way that helps, because sometimes I can lose in a way that helps me win.
Losing with grace. It's an important skill to learn because you're going to lose a hell of a lot more.
Well, some conversations with people, I let them think they won.
Hey, you got to pick your battles, you know?
Yes, sir. Well,
Especially
I'm
when
gonna.
you're a prison guy dealing with mech security dudes.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna let you go. Well, I'm gonna stop recording.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yep. Thanks for being here. All right.